I can't keep you cuffed on a commercial flight, and I gotta check my gun with my luggage. But if you fuck with me once, I'm gonna break your neck.
I can't fly.
What?
You heard me. I can't fly.
No. You're gonna have to do better than that, pal.
No, I don't have to do better than that because it's the truth. I can't fly. I suffer from aviophobia.
What does that mean?
It means I can't fly. I also suffer from acrophobia and claustrophobia.
I'll tell you what. If you don't cooperate, you're gonna suffer from podcastophobia.
That was a good selection.
Thank you. It was layered.
Now, my number one line from Midnight Run is, these things go down.
Of course.
Because like
I
that's
wonder why that speaks to you.
right. It speaks to me so well, but also it is so funny. Like
Yes.
even if you're not afraid of flying, his delivery of it is so
I mean,
magnificent.
so much of it is delivery.
And when I was at Sundance last, so 2020, I guess.
Is that the last time you were on a plane?
Correct.
Yeah, you don't think you're getting out of this episode without talking about that?
It is. I mean, look.
Someone
I
asked
think I
us-
would have taken a plane.
Yes.
Since obviously COVID is the main reason there was no flying for a while, obviously.
Right, and then most film festivals shifted to at least hybrid virtual.
But I had a kid, so it really just
All
became.
of it.
Yeah, it like the opportunity hasn't presented itself. I know some people have young children and they're like, we got to go visit family in California. We're getting on a plane.
Yeah.
I don't have family that I need to visit. Like my family's in New York. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's
No
and
family in the United Kingdom?
I do. I mean, I have some lingering,
Well.
more distant relatives in the UK. I do have some family, but you know what I mean? Where it's like, there are some people who are like, I got to take my kids to see my, the grandparents.
All the
and they live on a
in-laws,
plane ride
sure.
away. Right.
Yes.
And so it just hasn't happened.
This came up in Blank Dough recently,
Okay.
and our text thread with the
okay.
Doughboys.
Yeah.
And you said that January 2020 was the last plane you had been on.
Sundance,
And you
Utah,
said,
right.
I genuinely don't know when I'll go on a plane again. By the way, David has already started biting his nails at
which
this
I've
conversation
stopped doing recently,
topic.
so I need to
At
not.
the topic,
But to finish my Sundance story,
these things go down.
that's the thing. So I'm at lunch with Brigham Taylor. Shout out Brigham, who works at Disney.
Legendary
who's
producer.
right,
Yeah.
fan of the show, who's a great guy. And I tell him, like, I think I was probably like maybe gonna fly the next day or whatever. I'm like, I'm kind of anxious about flying. Like, I always am. And like, I'm always in my head. And like people, Kobe Bryant had just died, obviously in a helicopter accident, which is different, but
Worse?
still like, it's kind of in the air. And everyone was kind of rattled by that because that was really, shocking.
You're more
obviously.
afraid of helicopters than planes, right?
Well,
I just wanna make sure.
Well, I've never been in a helicopter. I'm certainly not. They're scarier than planes.
Thank you. I
like,
just want to make sure
statistically,
there's a
they're,
reasonable
like,
sense
oh,
of
yeah,
sanity.
Of course.
There's a chain of logic. I would never get in a helicopter. But
Neither
anyway.
would I. I mean, I've had like rich sort of people who have been in helicopters kind of tell me like, don't get in those things. Like they don't make a lot of sense.
There's that service Blade,
Let's not.
which
get
I forget
started
who
about
owns
this.
it. I think it's like Uber.
Let me look
Yeah,
at this.
Blade
Satan owns?
is like Uber for helicopters, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's in Uncut Gems. I always think of Uncut Gems. Anyway,
we're not exaggerating. It is truly like disgusting rich New Yorker Uber for helicopters.
Yeah.
How do I bypass?
I want to
traffic?
catch a Blade to Foxwoods or whatever the fuck it is.
But
Anyway,
I see them land.
yeah, you see if you're near the water, you can see the helipads.
Like, I
yeah.
think it's like on 33rd Street,
Yeah.
Manhattan. It is insane to watch them land.
Right.
It's really scary.
The thing with
That
helicopters
sucks.
is they both make sense in a way where you're like, okay, well, it just goes down like this. Like, and then you're also just like, but how does that work?
No,
Like,
the helicopter literally parallel parks.
Yeah.
It's so scary.
This is also a movie where Robert De Niro shoots a helicopter blade with one bullet and the thing explodes.
that's true.
And
With
you're
a
like-
handgun.
with a handgun. He just kind of squints and gets it,
Yeah.
and you're like,
It does crash into a cliff, right?
Yes, no,
That's
but
why
he
it
sends
explodes.
it spinning
Yes.
out of control.
Right.
but it's also basically 4 feet away from that cliff at that moment. It barely has to spin.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Anyway, I say this to Brigham, and he just looks at me. He's like, "These things go down, man. They go down." He just kept saying it to me,
This
which is
is-
very funny.
This is one of those movies where you're in the club. If
Yeah,
you find
exactly.
someone else who
Right.
you're like, I think you know, and you can quote the lines back to them, and the lines aren't like obvious. Well, the way that's worded, that could only be from a movie quoting in conversation things. You're not in a fucking Regal ad, right?
No.
The quotes from this movie can be repurposed in normal conversation because so much of it is just the way in which they're said.
Yes.
Right.
I was clocking while watching this. There's so many dialogue exchanges that I find so incredibly funny that are about like a 9-part back and forth.
Yep.
That on paper, there is no obvious punchline. And it's just about the rhythm.
Right.
And a lot of it is sort of like the anti-punchline that happens, where I was like, is this movie quietly, this is a take, is this movie quietly a big inspiration on Wes Anderson?
Interesting. Is it? Do we know?
Because shit like the Redwood conversation,
Yeah.
I'm like, that feels like a Wes Anderson joke.
I will say my wife's favorite bit from the movie is one of those. In the chorizo and egg scene,
Yes.
before the waitress talks about chorizo and eggs.
Coffee tea.
Yes, exactly. You know, how much is the coffee? It's 53 cents.
Yeah.
How much is tea? 53 cents. And then Grodin just does the perfect pause.
Perfect pause.
And just goes, I'll have tea.
Well, she says coffee. He looks down, and it's like he's individually counting the coins on the counter, check how many he has.
Yes.
Then he looks back up. He asks for tea. It's the same number. He looks back down for 3 times as long.
Yeah.
Like he's checking to see if the amount of money he has has changed. That feels like a thing in a Wes Anderson trailer.
Now I Googled, couldn't find any, moment of him ever saying like, a movie absolutely fucked Midnight Run.
PTA cites this movie all the time.
Yes, he
Obviously
does.
made a sort of secret sequel to this movie. There are a lot of guys of this generation who are like, that's quietly one of the best constructed American films of the 80s, if not ever.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised. And Wes Anderson always fucking cites Heat. That
yes,
Heat is one of his biggest inspirations.
Wes talks about that. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just
He
wouldn't.
loves Michael Mann. And,
Yes.
and Michael Mann's like very methodical approach to
I
filmmaking.
wouldn't be surprised if this movie is in his soup a little, but there's nothing to back that up.
I don't.
But I could, like the Tracy Walter scene, when Mosley finds him, that feels very much like a Wes Anderson kind of moment now that you say that.
Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of them. And like I read the quotes page and I'm like, God, all of this is so funny. But I could see how if you hadn't watched the movie, the quotes page wouldn't make you laugh.
Yeah. No, it almost sounds hacky. Like the exchange we just read.
Right.
The fist and, fistophobia. You're like, okay. I mean, right.
Look, we obviously performed it perfectly.
Of course. Beautiful.
No one has ever sounded more like Robert De Niro, a guy that no one knows how to impersonate. And I'm the first one to crack it.
Nobody
Nobody
knows how to do that.
Nobody knows how to impersonate me.
To be clear, I'm not good at it. I just know that you have to make it a question. If you're Robert De Niro.
And you have to repeat it multiple times.
Right.
The thing he does there, and De Niro does it again on like, I got 2 words for you, shut the fuck up, and a couple other moments where it's like, it feels like the stress of being in a quippy comedy is starting to get to him.
Yes.
Not maybe the actor to some degree, but certainly the character, where it's like he's set a precedent that he has funny one-liners, but he thinks he's only going to be with this guy for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And now he's just sort of starting to surrender. So there's something in the way that De Niro performs it where like fistophobia, if someone sold that with all of their might, you'd be like, is that really an interesting joke?
Right.
But the way he plays it, he's like, I don't know, fucking fistophobia.
Yep.
I don't have anything better for you.
He's tired. Everyone in this movie is tired.
The moment where Grodin calls it out back to him, and he's like, I know what you're going to say. You're going to throw me down a whatever the thing is.
Right. That is so funny.
Yeah.
He's basically
I gotta
called out,
find
like,
that
you
note.
have a Mad Lib structure.
Yes, right.
A couple of ways you threaten me.
Yep.
Exactly.
I thought that's what you were going to do, by the way, for the intro is shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite line in the movie.
Here come 2 words for you. Shut the fuck
No,
up.
here comes, Jack, you're a grown man. You have control over your own podcasts.
I mean, every line is good within its context.
Yep.
This is a movie we
You
wanted
have 2
to do.
emotions, silence and rage.
Yeah.
Is huge for me. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
No, this is a movie we want to do since the beginning. Brest, one of these guys, as we've been saying, fits as cleanly into the sort of thesis of this podcast as anyone.
Right.
And this is one of my favorite movies,
Mm-hmm.
a movie I've watched many times. I watch at least once a year.
Yeah.
And is in that rare canon for me of movies that get better every single time I watch them.
Right.
Every time I watch it, I go like, I'm noticing things I haven't noticed before. I'm able to appreciate the craft of the construction even more.
Yeah.
And in telling people that we were doing this series, because we have a couple short series in a row, we've been reaching out to potential guests. We'll send them a list of like 15 upcoming episodes, and it's across 3 or 4 different directors. And the amount of people who've gone like, well, obviously Midnight Run.
Right.
And I go like, Midnight Run is claimed. and they go, well, if anything happens, if anything shifts,
Nothing's going to happen.
and I'm just like, there has never been a harder lock on an episode in history. And then I tell them who the guest is, and every one of them's gone, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
I'm not going to fight that. I'm not jealous. This is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their career and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. This is certainly his first blank check.
Yes.
But it's a blank check to do the type of movie he's proven he can do well with more creative freedom.
And it's sort of a casting blank check.
Yes.
Sort of a control blank check.
Right. The next three are more crazy passion projects. This is him taking something that's an obvious sort of like commercial layup.
Right.
And being like, I'm going to treat this like it is my magnum opus. I'm going to make this thing fucking diamond cut. We're talking about the films of Martin Brest. Podverly Hills Cast is the name of the series. And today we're talking about what I consider to be his masterpiece, Midnight Run. It's the apex.
I would agree. Certainly. I don't really even know if there's, well, I guess Beverly Hills Cop's very special, but no, this is a better film.
Yeah.
I watched that again last night. No, this is miles and miles better, as great as Beverly Hills Cop is.
I love it. But Beverly Hills Cop is a little bit of a like lightning in a bottle movie.
Yeah, it's almost a happy accident that it's so good.
Yeah.
Like, the talent involved makes sense that it's good and fun, but then you're like, this is actually like even a little better than it should be. Midnight Run is beyond that. Like,
and it's all intentional.
Yeah.
You're like, this is just a perfectly made film.
And this is the best version of this kind of story, the odd couple on a road trip.
Right. The road trip movie, the one crazy night movie I know it's more
It is basically the platonic ideal of an action comedy, I think, in terms of like the thing I always point to in this movie that it gets better than I think anything else I can cite is it stays funny from beginning to end.
Right.
You care about the characters. And like the center of the action movie plot is not nonsense. It is intricately designed, but it is understandable. It is compelling. There are clear tension and stakes in every scene. And they genuinely get themselves into a thing where you're like, I don't know how they solve this movie. And it's incredible that the denouement of this film is like a non-action sequence that is so exquisitely constructed to be a pressure cooker. An hour after we've seen fucking helicopters exploding and cars exploding, now suddenly a couple guys talking in an airport is like the highest stakes things you could possibly imagine.
Right.
And it's able to make all of those things coexist because Beverly Hills Cop was reverse engineered. It's this, I'm sure you guys have talked about it. Sylvester Stallone vehicle. They bring Eddie in. Eddie riffs a lot. It's really funny. The parts of the movie that are left over from the Sylvester Stallone version stick out like a sore thumb. And everything here, like the comedy, the action, the menace, when it wants to be serious, it is serious in a way that seems like it fits along with everything else. And all the pieces make the other pieces better.
Perfectly
when
said.
we go to Jack's house, that makes everything that follows funnier because we've understood how low he is sunken.
So many movies like this. Rush Hour film, I do think is quite good, the first one. Like when you cut to Tom Wilkinson, great actor that he was.
Yes.
And you're setting up the fucking serious part of the movie, everyone's like checking out a little bit. You're like, when are we cutting back to Jackie and Chris?
Yeah.
This movie, when you cut to Dennis Farina, you're like, hell yeah, I'm in business.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
People forget
that Tom Wilkinson is third billed in Rush Hour.
Yes.
And I remember when my mom interviewed him for, some tonier and nicer project around that time, he was like, that was the movie that changed my life.
Yes.
Not getting an Oscar nomination for In the Bedroom, which happened like 3 years later. Obviously, that gets you better parts or whatever, but and not the Full Monty, which was a big breakup.
Best picture now.
It was being in a box office smash like Rush Hour. Anyway,
that might be a five-timer club story now. You've told that a number of times.
I've told
no, in a good way. But
I've at least told it once before.
This is a movie where the shoe leather is all entertaining.
Yes.
The stakes are never compromised. Like there is a consistent sense of danger in this movie where also sometimes you get to the part where the funny guy has to save the day. It's one of the reasons Beverly Hills Cop works is that Eddie plays that shit well.
Yeah,
but some other guys, it's like, you're not serious. You can't coexist in this movie with a serious actor playing a serious villain. Or it's like when the movie starts to get caught up in the plot, you're like, can't we get back to the jokes? This was fun half an hour ago, and now the movie is caught up in its own bullshit. This is like like I Want You Back, my pick for the greatest pop song of all time, my personal favorite, is a song.
Good movie. I have a good song.
Great
Probably
movie.
a good movie.
I think it's better than most movies as a movie, even though it's a song. But that is a song where I'm like, the magic of that song is that the chorus and the verses are equally good. There's no part of I Want You Back where you're like, can we get through this to get to the better part?
Yeah.
Where you're like, every section of it is good in its own way. And this is similarly the same thing. Alan Sepinwall.
Oh, hi, guys.
American Scholar on Midnight Run.
I'm just going to say I am owed this appearance.
Yeah.
You know.
It's carved in stone.
The check was there.
Threatening to do him forever.
Yep.
We just messaged you and we went, it's happening.
Yeah. No, you never need to have me on the podcast again after this, because this is really all I wanted. If you want to have me back, I love being here.
Especially first two times you kind of took.
Yes. Yeah, you took a couple strays. You took what Invisible Man and what's the other Memoirs of
Top of the Lake China Girl
and Memoirs of Invisible Man.
Oh, puss.
Ugh. Don't remind me.
We shouldn't even think about him during a discussion of the fun film Midnight Run. I don't want a second of puss thought.
Do you remember when that episode came out?
I know, and some people said he was good.
We were hard on.
We've complained about that before multiple times as well. Not that I'm saying like, oh, you can have this, but what now would be the next movie where you're like, well,
this is your number one favorite movie.
This is my number one favorite.
Yeah.
Right. So now that it's off the table.
I think almost everything, like you have this great collection of guests, all of whom I think are mostly better qualified than me because I'm okay. There are 3 movies that if you were to do them, I would again break into the studio and insist it was me. And
this is one of the 3 or 3 additional?
3 in addition to this. And you may notice a commonality between the other 3.
Your letterbox 4.
Which are, these are not necessarily my letterbox 4, but these are the ones where I feel like I could do better than anybody else.
Okay.
The Martian, if you ever do Ridley Part 2.
Sure.
Apollo 13, if you ever do Howard.
Sure.
Right Stuff, if you ever do Kaufman.
So after this, it's just space.
Yes. At NASA. It's my bag.
It's not. What about Rocket Man? Because my mom has claimed Rocket Man.
No. But if you do October Sky, which was based on a book called Rocket Men, then yes.
Yes.
Your mom has claimed Rocket Man.
You didn't listen to...
I haven't listened to it yet. This is on the Die Hard 2.
Yes.
Correct. I haven't known. My podcasts are kind of
I mean, I would have done Die Hard, but, Kevin Smith is slightly, better qualified to do that than
he had some bona fides.
Is there any chance we ever do Dexter Fletcher on the podcast?
No, Rocket Man, the fucking Harlan Williams movie.
That I know.
Yeah,
right.
I knew what you were talking about.
I didn't know.
Within the context of space movies.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't know.
My mom doesn't care about Rocket Man.
She might.
She thought it was fine.
I mean, I think she probably enjoyed herself.
She did.
It's a very enjoyable
She
movie.
did. She wasn't like, if you ever do that.
I mean, you might do Cuarón. That's not that many movies. I could do Gravity.
Sure. Okay. So basically, anytime we screw on an astronaut helmet, we should at least throw it by you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to consider me for other things, that's great. I, again, love the show, but I don't feel like I'm essential versus other people.
I don't remember when it came up in our friendship. Maybe it was just from you posting about the movie a lot, and I post about it a fair amount as well. And then you and I have had a number of conversations about it, both online and offline. And then was it last fall you did a screening of this film at IFC with Matt Zoller Seitz, or was it longer ago?
It was sometime last year,
yes.
Definitely.
Yes, which was my first time getting to see the movie in a theater, which was incredible.
Yes.
And so then we talked about it even more then. But I feel like for the last couple of years, whenever you and I talk about this movie, it's like, God, just fucking do Brest.
Yes.
Like, it wasn't an incentive to further push it up the chain, although I have just been waiting for you to come on and do this episode.
I'm so excited. We're going to be here for 7 hours.
Yes.
No.
Yep.
No.
8.
No. We are not. We can talk about films and love them without having to break running time records. This is a marker I am throwing down for this podcast. And length does not equal appreciation.
No, but this is a 4-hour episode.
No, it isn't. Although this movie is not long. It's basically 2 hours long, but it's roomy.
2.6.
I mean, an argument could be made it's slightly too long. Like, I don't know that you need the car chase in the desert. It's wonderful, great stunts in and of itself.
But then
like,
Elfman couldn't have his 8th sax solo without it. But carry on.
I think this is one of Elfman's best scores.
I do too, but that's a controversial statement. Some
I know.
people really hate this
I know.
score.
no,
I'm putting
it's
it down.
incredible. And
It's incredible work.
And do you guys know the lyrical version of the end credits?
Alan, I listen to it all the time.
As do I. It is on my workout mix. Try to believe.
Try to believe.
Try to believe.
But, like, my point on the running time is more just like, yes, like there's a leaner version of this movie.
Yeah.
It's probably still great.
yeah.
And a movie like this, you feel like should be lean and fun, right? Classic, cable classic, right? And so you feel the Brest roominess, which will only grow.
But this is where he's found the perfect midpoint.
Yes,
exactly.
He's found the room
thing
for
about
the
this
characters.
guy's career.
Yes.
It's a hangout movie.
Right.
Like it's
Yes, and
you
it
want to
works.
spend as much time as possible with Jack and the Duke.
Whereas Sense of a Woman
yes.
is like, let's hang out with these two guys. And I'm like, Al Pacino screaming and a non-entity? Like, that's who we're hanging out with? Like, that's it? Are we going to hang out with anyone else? And he's like, no.
I mean, if it was Pacino and Philip Seymour Hoffman, I would
That'd
want
be
to
more
spend like
interesting.
all
Look,
day with them.
We've recorded that episode.
We make that.
We certainly talk about that concept.
We
yes.
make that case.
Yes.
Yes.
How can you not make
Yeah.
that case? Yeah. Midnight Run it's just all perfect here. And then he never quite has it again.
But is Beverly Hills Cop 90 some odd minutes?
Beverly Hills Cop is 105 minutes.
Okay.
So even that's like a
140.
smidge roomy.
A smidge roomy.
An hour 45.
This film has 20 minutes on that, and that
Yes, it
20
does.
minutes does feel like it is character detail primarily.
Right.
Like
And
it is, whether or not
Yes.
it's earned, it all benefits the integrity of the movie. It's not wasted time.
But then it's like Scent of a Woman then adds 30 more minutes, and Meet Joe Black then adds 30 more minutes.
Jesus.
And then Geely, he's like, I pulled myself back to 2 hours. And you're
Right.
like, 2 hours is long for Geely.
Because Going
obviously.
in Style is 90, basically right on the dot, right?
Going in Style is, I mean, in my memory, quite short, 97.
Okay.
But the thing with Going in Style is that also feels roomy.
Yeah.
Like, which I like.
He's got
but
very
it's a movie
deliberate
that's
pacing.
right. Exactly.
But
like,
this movie does move very fast.
well, it moves across the country.
It moves across
Sometimes
the country.
they slow
Twice.
And you're cross-cutting often between like 5 different sort of threads.
down. Yes.
There's the thing that JJ pulled up in the dossier that I think we should read the full quote at length at some point. But it was the turnkey on this movie.
At length.
At length.
Okay. Yeah.
Slow it down.
I mean, I'll open the dossier now, but yes.
That it took him years to put together, but this movie is his riff on It's a Mad, 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 Mad World,
Sure.
which he
Yes.
cites as being his transformative movie experience as a child. And he was not consciously trying to emulate it. And in design, he was citing other movies. But then he was like, oh, I'm realizing that crystallized in my mind as a young child is like, this is the coolest a movie could be. Just like fun characters, fun tension, constant moving, energy, action. And it does have that thing where like towards the end of the movie, you're like, there are like 8 or 9 different threads.
Mhm.
You know, you're following Marvin, you're following Serrano's henchmen,
Mhm.
you're following Serrano and Jimmy, you're following
Moscone and Jerry.
on top of obviously the Duke and Walsh.
And Mosley.
And Mosley, yes.
Yes. Obviously, the Duke and Walsh is primary,
Mhm.
and the other guys are in and out in terms
But
of
none of
importance,
those
but they're
feel
never
incidental.
Nope.
And they're set up at
No,
the
you
beginning
need
and they
that.
stay until the end.
Because you need every time one of them then intersects, another one can bash in like just as quickly.
And it's got the Mad, 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 Mad World thing where you're like, it's basically always cycling through them. There's no one where it's like, you've been out of the movie for 45 minutes.
2 questions.
Please.
One, have either of you seen It's a Mad, 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 Mad World?
Oh, I grew up, like my family loved that. I've
I
seen
think
it
of that
6
as a
times, and
TV
Griffin
movie.
has just blown my mind about this.
I saw the quote today and it blew my mind
Have
as
you
well.
seen it?
Yeah, I was obsessed with
I've
it as a
never
child.
seen
I
it.
have not seen it in a long time.
I don't think I've ever seen the full
That
thing.
is a movie that is deeply indulgent.
Well,
I
yeah,
have
like
a lot
3
of
hours
fun.
long, right?
3
Yeah.
hours long is the shortest cut.
Right.
3
like-
hours long was the studio hack job.
Right.
It
It was meant to be
originally
like
was-
3.5.
I
Yes.
think it was meant to be 4 with an
202.
intermission.
202 was the original cut.
Okay.
I just looked up.
One of the
Yeah.
running bits in the movie
3.5
is
hours.
Sid Caesar is locked in a hardware store,
Mhm.
and he's doing everything he possibly can to get out. And it's just Sid Caesar, one of the great physical comedians in TV history, just getting beat up over and over again, trying different ways to escape. And by the end of it, he just looks like an utter wreck.
Mhm.
That's Jack Walsh.
Yeah. Yep.
Jesus.
I mean,
And that movie, for people who don't know, was a comedy made by Stanley Kramer.
Right, who's not primarily a comedy director. He made like issue pictures.
And it was like an attempt to sort of make the original action comedy, but also make like the biggest budget comedy imaginable. That was
all the comic stars you could think
of. Put every
yes.
funny person in a movie. And the setup, have you ever seen this movie, Ben?
I have.
Right. Loosely remade as Rat Race.
Right.
But Jimmy Durante dies, says there's a briefcase with a ton of money buried under the big W. And the 10 people who pull over to the side of the road and see him die all go off in their cars to try to get to the money first. And it's just like, one car is these two, one car is these two, like, and you're all these narratives, but it is, in a way, it feels like 6 different movies. I mean, the point is, when you're cutting from like Ethel Merman to Sid Caesar, they're in different threads.
Yes. Phil Silvers winds up in the river with the kid, which then the Simpsons did in the Homer the Vigilante, I think.
Right. And then there's just this central thing of where everyone's after the same money.
It kind of feels like a sketch movie.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know?
100%.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was like it's a storage device.
Sure.
For comedic ideas, right?
Right.
Like the premise is so big and it's just we got to get from here to here. And in that destination, in that journey to the destination, anything can happen. We can run into the Three Stooges for 4 seconds. Whereas this is like, it's very focused. This is a weirdly plotty movie.
But it is focused, yes. Of course, it's not 16 different storylines like that are in parallel, like a Rat Race.
No, and every piece of this movie moves the story forward.
But it doesn't have Smash Mouth in it.
It doesn't.
That's a problem.
No,
it doesn't have
Rat
John
Race
Lovitz
now.
turning into Hitler, which is the one like good part of Rat Race.
Agreed.
I think the squirrel thing is fun. You should have bought a squirrel thing is funny.
There's
Remember
some
that?
funny stuff in that.
Like that's a good gag.
I think the Klaus Barbie sequence is the one like perfectly designed.
That's like a clever sequence where you're almost like, this feels like it should almost be in another movie, right? Like, because that's what Rat Race kind of is.
Right.
It's just like, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? You know, like they don't have anything to do with each other, really.
But that sequence also has the sort of Curb Your Enthusiasm thing where you don't quite put together what they're building.
The Barbie Museum. To be
All
clear,
the
they think they're going to Lovitz is part of a family. They think they're going to the Barbie Museum. It's actually Klaus Barbie, the German Nazi monster.
And their
whatever.
car breaks down.
Yes.
And so they steal a Volkswagen from the Barbie Museum, and then Lovitz burns his tongue on the car cigarette.
And his upper lip somehow gets smeared in.
Right.
Yeah. Look, you can imagine where this all goes. It's much like the Father Ted plotline where there is a weird square of dirt on the window that no one has bothered to clean, and then Father Ted is in front of the square of dirt and starts ranting at someone, and he looks like Hitler.
Yeah.
Anyway.
10 out of 10. Alan, you saw this movie in theaters?
That was my other question. When did you first see Midnight Run, Alan?
I'm not 100% positive because I have a very strong memory of seeing Die Hard in theaters that week because I went with some teen Hebrew summer camp travel thing and we saw it. Yeah, exactly. We just everybody went nuts with that. Yes. I must have seen it with my dad because it's the kind of movie my dad loved and it was R-rated and I was 14 at the time. So, he would have had to take me. My strong memory of it, though, is just seeing it on HBO over and over and over again. The first strong memory I have of seeing it in a theater is years later when they did a screening at the 92nd Street Y where Grodin appeared and was going to take questions after. And I realized part of the way through the movie that he was sitting right in front of me. Oh. And then he gets up afterwards, and it turns out he does not want to talk about the movie. He is there to discuss his charitable work on behalf of nonviolent criminal offenders, which is a very noble cause.
Right.
But this is 100%
He's a pretty
him.
Serious dude.
The last 25 years of his life were spent primarily trying to get people off of death row.
Yeah, and that's great. And I get if you want to take advantage of the captive audience to some degree.
Sure.
But he kept steering almost every question back to that. Either that or he would start telling stories about feuds he had with different people in show business where he was always the wronged party.
Of course.
Yes.
I mean, I would prefer he was trying to get maybe Clifford back off of Naughty Row. I don't know. I was trying to do a Clifford joke. These things go down.
Come on. You got this.
Go down.
Okay, but you guys have left out what you said before about how you notice new things every time.
Yeah.
When I did it with my family a couple times ago, I'm always laughing so hard at these things go down that I had never before heard in the middle of the rant. He then says, "It's too big. It can't go up."
That's a huge part of it.
Like that he says these go down and it can't go up, like one after the other is incredible.
It's very funny which is, I mean, it's not my actual like source of my aviophobia or whatever. Is like I don't
the movie
understand
Midnight Run.
I don't understand how planes so big can go in sky.
Yeah,
but I do think that is like everybody has that thought at one point or another when they're in a plane where they're like, this thing's made of metal. Like, how is this working again? Like, I know physics or whatever, but like, what the hell is going on here?
We'll get to it in a second, but I also didn't realize that is truly the like root genesis of this movie. Is that?
In what way?
The concept of this movie stems out of what if a bounty hunter was afraid of planes and you took that easy solve out of the situation?
Oh, yeah. George Gallo has told this story.
That was his seat.
Yep. He met a cop who told him like he had to transport a prisoner. The prisoner wouldn't fly. He got stuck in the car.
Right. And Gallo
miserable.
was on a plane and had a panic attack and was like, if you build a road movie where there's a ticking clock and high stakes, but the plane is out of the question, that feels like a funny starting point for a movie.
Right.
I do think, to what you just said, this feels like a movie that not one person would identify as a masterpiece or a classic their first time watching it.
No.
I remember seeing this for the first time. There were people in my life who I would hear. My friend Derek's mother would always say, "You haven't seen Midnight Run? Don't you love movies? You haven't seen Midnight Run?" Well, we were growing up when I was like a kid, right? I remember this being part of like the third installment of I Love the 80s when they started like circling back and redoing every year. And they were like, okay, what's like the 8th most important movie of every given year? And they did a Midnight Run segment. And like a lot of the talking heads were talking about this as like one of the best comedies of the 80s. And I'm like, this is not talked about by people in the same breath as the major comedies of the 80s that I think of. It's interesting that these guys are canonizing this to this degree. And then I saw it on cable at some point a couple years later, and I was like, yeah, that's good. It's rock solid. And I got to the last scene and I got choked up. And I was like, that's surprising that it hit me that hard emotionally, because I didn't feel like I was that locked in until that point, although I have no gripes with this film. And then I rewatched it. And I was just like, you know what? This thing's kind of undeniable. And then I just keep fucking rewatching it, and it keeps getting better for me. It is one of those movies that did all right in theaters, but became such a cable TV mainstay. And I think like elevated its status because it is the type of film where the more you have to watch it, the more you love it.
Right.
Saw this thing on a friggin' porch.
Hell yeah.
First time, baby.
It's a great porch movie.
Yeah.
I think as a critic or whatever, you put this kind of movie, if you're in a bucket of like, yeah, that's great entertainment.
Right.
It's not high art. Like, so I wouldn't treat it like high art.
And Roger Ebert had one of the most
B+.
positive
That's an 8 out of 10. Yeah, exactly.
Of anyone at the time, which was 3.5 stars. But even he was like, this is a very formulaic movie, but they do the formula very well.
Right.
Hats off to like impeccable craft. He wasn't like the film that everyone will be studying for the next 40 years.
Right. And then I think I think in general, in criticism, there's been a movement back towards more sort of like a poptimist kind of thing, much as has happened in other media.
Yes.
Of like, well, we should actually have more appreciation for like formula done perfectly or right. Like, like mainstream stuff.
Well, like Stagecoach
that transcends.
Right.
And then you talk to people like Paul Thomas Anderson, who you're like, well, this is an artiste. And he's like, yeah, but what I admire most is like craft at the highest level, something like Midnight Run.
Right. He's like, this is a perfect invisible craft movie.
Right. And you're like, well, and I do feel like my feelings on that have shifted as I've matured. I'm so mature. And I'm mature.
You're deeply mature.
Yeah.
Damon Affleck always cited it's the reason Affleck ends up in Geely. Like, there's a lot of guys of that exact generation who are very high level in Hollywood, who are like, that's the fucking like the Rosetta Stone.
Well, I will tell you,
much used term off the shelf.
I will tell you a story that is also a shameless plug, but a good story and relevant to this.
Please.
Okay. So I have a new book. It's coming out next year. It's about Better Call Saul. It'll be out in February. And I've been doing interviews with people on Zoom, and I've got a Midnight Run poster in my
great poster.
Yes, exactly. Like,
The classic?
It's the one of him dragging the Duke along. It's the other one. And it's over my shoulder on the wall behind me when I zoom. And I'm talking to Peter Gould about Better Call Saul and what a hard time they had figuring out what that show was going to be. And finally he says, I'm looking at your poster and it reminds me, like, one day I just had this thought in my head. What if it's Bob Odenkirk and Jonathan Banks handcuffed to each other, wandering through the desert? And that to me unlocked, okay, it's that relationship. We will do that on the other show.
Dead on.
Yes.
Because when they first announced that show, it was, we're going to do a half-hour sitcom. Wouldn't it be funny to transpose this character to a straight-up law office sitcom?
Yeah, and also, bounty hunting is TV friendly. Like, there's a new case of the week. Yes.
And Breaking Bad was always, like, much like Sopranos and Mad Men, one of those dramas that is quietly funnier than most comedies on TV.
Mm-hmm.
But Better Call Saul has this, like, incredibly bizarre tone. This weird balancing act that I think it pulls off perfectly. It does feel very indebted to Midnight Run.
Yep, and they finally, like in the next to last season, they did the episode where they're stuck in the desert together. And he was like, we thought we would do that midway through season 1, and it just took them forever to get to it.
I do want to call out, I don't know if you guys have noticed, Ben is wearing something different today.
He's wearing like a blue cardigan.
Well, he's wearing his blue cardigan. He's dressed pretty conservatively on the grand scale of things. But Ben, I've heard a certain item.
What are you talking about?
When did you do that?
I just noticed that.
Ben has handcuffed himself to himself.
Oh, these.
Yes, those.
Yeah.
He is engineering the episode while truly handcuffed.
It's just a misunderstanding.
With you?
Yeah.
Well,
Where did you get those?
the Friendlies Corporation
Oh boy.
and I, they're not too pleased with me right now.
Uh-huh.
But I don't want to dwell on it.
You told him that the money from the t-shirt sales was going to charity, right? You were trying to...
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah. Truly, it's going to get worked out. It's not a big deal. But do you guys happen to have a handcuff key on you?
Here's my question.
Yeah.
No is the answer.
Yeah.
Can you not handcuff someone on a plane? Like, the way he's like, anyway, unfortunately, I cannot handcuff you, right?
Well, maybe if he was an actual FBI agent.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the other thing Gallo said is he's like, I had written a couple cop movies at that time. Cop movies were really big at the time. No one really was writing stuff about bounty hunters, and bounty hunters are fascinating because they act like cops, but technically everything they're doing is kind of illegal.
Right, especially
like,
if they're using any kind of force or coercion.
And they're
Means to
kind
an
of
end.
rude.
Yeah.
And they'll just intrude on your home.
Well, it's also just a bizarre element of our legal system of you can pay someone to go find someone.
Right.
And they can't do anything illegal, but also their job is to basically bring them back.
And if they succeed,
And are they nice?
Yeah, they're really nice.
If
and they're in normal offices that aren't scary.
If they succeed, then it's sort of like all is forgiven. Whatever it took.
Yep.
Ends justify the means.
Right.
But if you fuck up along the way, it's like, wait a second, what have you done across the last 3 days?
All right. Well, hold on. Okay, this is me going wildly out of order, but it's an important question that I've had often over the years, which is how much trouble is Jack in at the end of the movie by letting the Duke go? Because he's gotten Mosley to agree to drop all the charges for all the illegal shit he has done throughout the movie, in part because he's going to take the Duke into local court in L.A., and instead he lets him go.
He's in no trouble, right?
Well, with Joey Pants.
Joey Pants can be mad at him, but I don't think he's in any legal trouble.
Joey Pants is also
No, but,
financially ruined now.
Yes, no, he's ruined Joey Pants, but isn't Mosley... I mean, I know Mosley has another case against Serrano, but part of the case is the kidnapping. That's one of the bigger charges, and the witness for the kidnapping is no longer there.
Right, but that's not Jack's job, to get him. I mean, one assumes Mosley can subpoena him and be like, you must appear in court, as a witness.
I'm just saying they made a deal and Jack broke the terms of the deal.
That's true, but it was a deal a verbal deal.
But
right?
it's also the element of this movie that I think is so perfectly thought out, where it's like, the Duke has undeniably committed crimes.
Yes.
That must be prosecuted because of the way our law is structured. But everyone kind of agrees they like what he did.
Yep.
Everyone hates Serrano. They have a mutual enemy. And their contempt for the Duke is you fucking idiot, you thought you could get away with this. Not, we think that what you did is wrong. And they all kind of know that apprehending him is going to lead to his death and is not going to hurt Serrano at all. They're sort of working against their own better judgment when any of them are trying to apprehend him.
But it's also part of like the thing that makes it so effective in the relationship with Jack is he's this guy. He, not that Grodin was a small guy, but he does not seem physically imposing.
No.
He's got this very sort of meek demeanor. He speaks softly.
Yes.
He's a nerd. He's an accountant. You do not expect him to be any kind of threat whatsoever. And he uses that. Like he just sizes up Jack instantly and realizes, oh, this guy's not very bright. I can just push his buttons on everything. And so like he should be the beta male and he is the alpha in every single interaction they have, even when Jack like has his gun out and is screaming at him.
And watching Jack get flustered is the most entertaining thing in the world. It does not get old.
I also just want what I have always called a midnight run tan, which is just how dirty they are at the end of the movie. That they look like they've been on the beach in a weird way. Their hair's mussed up. They're just like caked in mud. It's so hot.
Stage of DeNiro in this movie, I think, is about as good as any man has ever looked in a movie. It is one of the movies that makes me the most envious, where I'm like, if I could pick, that's what I would look like. Everything about the fucking jacket and the hair.
I bought a jacket like that almost entirely out of my love of this movie, and I wore it in my 20s, and I did not look like Jack Walsh.
He just fucking wears the hell out of it.
I agree. He looks fantastic.
But also, you're like, this guy's
Still
a
have
mess.
the cuffs on.
You think he's gonna fucking bail on the bed?
I can't take him off.
Have you met my man before?
What do you want me to do, David? I showed up, and I couldn't miss this episode. All right,
He's a professional.
With the runaway success of Beverly Hills Cop, the most profitable film of 1984 at the box office domestically.
For 20 years, the most successful R-rated comedy ever. Or R-rated movie, period.
Right, before Passion or Dick Rice.
Matrix Reloaded, I think, finally beat it.
So it was 19 years, whatever, yes. So Brest lines up another project, a remake of the Claude Zidi French cop comedy My New Partner.
Okay.
Written by W.D. Richter, the great W.D. Richter who wrote, in Buckaroo Banzai.
Yes. Claude
other
Zidi, like the preeminent French farce filmmaker who for a while there, Hollywood was remaking every single thing he put out.
But were they bringing Claude in?
No.
No, they were not. And he was the original Asterix. No, he was the original director of the first Asterix movie.
Right. Yeah. But he did the original Three Men and a Baby? Am I wrong about that?
Probably, yeah.
A lot of his movies were remade. Yeah.
So the screenplay for this remake is written with Nicholson and in mind, but then Danny DeVito wants to do it, and then it gets set up at Fox with Dustin Hoffman.
True Lies, I'm sorry, is the one. Yes.
La Totale. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman is going to be the experienced cop. Sean Penn is going to be the young cop. Okay. Some new writers come in. Tootsie writer Murray Shigzel, Larry Gross, who did 48 Hours. Apparently everyone's getting on famously, but then Leonard Goldberg, who fired Brest from War Games, which we talked about last time, is put in charge of Fox, and Brest is like, fuck you, I quit.
Right. I'm not doing this again.
I just raised my middle finger.
Yes.
So then Dustin Hoffman are like, well, then what could I do with you? I want to do a movie with you. And so they find it. Michael Ovitz, at that point, a super agent, finds them a little movie called Rain Man. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this.
And was written to supposedly originally was going to be Dustin Hoffman as Rain Man, which the role he plays, and Jack Nicholson as the brother.
Yeah.
Makes more sense age-wise.
Yeah.
Of course, instead, Tom Cruise comes aboard.
Yes.
A great performance. He's just oddly young for the movie.
Yeah, but he sells it so hard you don't
think about it.
That's the performance in that movie that should have won the Oscar.
Agree so hard.
100%. But this is the whole thing with Dustin Hoffman movies. They all would just like insist on rewrites. He would take all kinds of creative control. I'm not speaking out of school when I say a gigantic asshole, like one of the most notorious assholes in Hollywood history.
Yeah, and also just like an incredibly meticulous, neurotic, overly
finicky,
obsessive.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we've talked about it in our Ishtar app and others, but like he only made like 4 movies in the 80s.
Brest calls
Hoffman.
No, I'm saying Brest calls Hoffman a doctor of microsurgery because of
said.
Anyway, so Brest is like, this is never going to happen. I'm quitting.
Yeah.
Quits that too.
I'm just saying, Hoffman, a guy who basically began and ended the decade, was bookmarking it with Oscars, was like as respected as anyone could be, and Hollywood was just like not fucking worth it. Like he was so difficult that even though he was a huge star and was at his artistic peak, it was just like fucking life's too short to work with Dustin Hoffman. You could see he and Brest getting along very, very well.
Right.
They make a lot of sense as a pairing, but also it sounds like Brest at a certain point was like, you know what? This is never going to get done. As much as the idea of us working together is great,
it'll take forever. Right.
We're just going to keep heightening each other's obsessiveness.
Okay, so let's put Brest aside. George Gallo sold his first screenplay at the age of 20. Worked as a truck driver throughout his 20s, though, because he could never get anything produced. 1986, he finally gets a screenplay made. Brian De Palma's film Wise Guys, a big bomb.
Huge flop.
One of De Palma's least remembered movies in a weird way.
That's the Kirk Douglas Lancaster one?
No. This is the Joe Piscopo, Danny DeVito one, which my best friend Mike and I, there's one line we would quote all the time, which is they steal the credit card of a more important mobster named Acavano. And so then they're using it to finance their trip down to Atlantic City. And everywhere they go, they hand the credit card and someone says, "Thank you, Mr. Acavano." And they turn to each other and go, "No, thank you, Mr. Acavano."
I mean, it sounds sort of funny.
It's the only funny thing in the movie. So I've
That's
just
tough
saved
news
you
for
the time.
Wise Guys. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Tough Guys, the name of the other
Yes.
one? Okay. They have very similar titles,
And
right?
Douglas
Yes.
and Lancaster rob a train in that one.
Yes.
Right. Kirk Douglas's Brian De Palma movie is, of course, The Fury.
Yes.
So
that bombs.
Yes, that bombs. But Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer are intrigued. He starts writing a screenplay for them called Bulletproof Hearts that eventually becomes Bad Boys many years later.
Yes.
And then he starts to conceive of Midnight Run, which is essentially the thing you're saying. The bounty hunter who is afraid to fly was his original idea.
Right. He started with the idea of Walsh being the one who's afraid to fly.
Yes.
And building the whole movie around that.
It was based on, I guess, a moment where he stopped an airplane because he was so scared of it taking off, which is one of those things that I might be afraid of flying, but I am more afraid of the social embarrassment of being like, I have to get off the plane, like, which I know happens. I know that is a thing that could happen, but like, Jesus.
But it is a good aha moment to like personally experience getting kicked off of a plane like that and then go, this is an interesting starting point for a movie. If I'm not allowed on a plane and I need to get to X, what now happens along the way?
Right.
And then you heighten that to, bounty hunter.
And as you say, you already mentioned this, but basically he was like, bounty hunters are interesting. They don't have to report to anyone. They are kind of illegal.
Yeah.
It's not essentially kidnapping, but that's basically what they're doing. And they haven't been discussed enough in movies, like as cop movies are everywhere. He's working on the Paramount lot. He throws this idea at Marty Brest. First...
He hasn't written it. It's just an idea he's been percolating.
Yeah, first throw some other idea.
No,
at him,
I've heard him say he had part of it written. He ran into Brest in the parking lot outside Don Simpson's office.
Yeah.
And Marty's like, "Well, what are you working on?" And he says, "Well, I've got this little idea, and I don't want to waste your time with it now." And Brest is like, "No, tell me."
Yeah.
And he starts telling him, and he says, "Have you written any of it yet? I got pages in my trunk.
Yeah.
Give them to me."
Oh, wow. Okay, but there wasn't a finished draft.
I don't think it was finished. No.
Okay.
First, I think he mentions Bulletproof Hearts. Brest's like, it's sort of interesting, but no.
Yeah.
Then he starts talking about apparently some sort of like gold robbery movie. They start talking about robbery movies like The Hot Rock or like Friends of Eddie Coyle or whatever.
Because Brest at this point, after Beverly Hills Cop, it's like you have quantified yourself as someone who's at the top level of doing this type of thing.
Right.
It feels like he was being strategic enough about his career that he's like, if I pitch another star-driven action comedy, they're going to give me a lot of freedom. I'll have an easy
That's
green
the
light.
thing I'm the most
Let me
known
find
for
the
at this
right
point.
piece of material to start on.
Right. And so the thing Gallo finally says to him is like, it's this movie, bounty hunter, white collar guy, blah, blah. Is that like, I want it to be in a tight frame, right? A few days, because there's a ticking clock. And I sort of want it to be like the last detail.
Yeah.
Like kind of like a quasi road trip movie with like an end in sight, right? Like, the kind of like we have to get here by here.
It's one of the best things even beyond that about this film and its construction is that like early on, Mardukas calls out, you realize if I get sent to jail, I'll be dead within 24 hours. Like everyone knows that kind of part and parcel with delivering him.
Right. He's then at the mercy of the mob, basically.
Right. And he's
even though
done.
He's technically.
Right. This movie is a funereal march.
Meets some bounty hunters. He says some guys are kind of like gentlemen, others are like cowboys. So he kind of settles somewhere in the middle there for Jack. starts writing.
Well, and I think John Ashton's character ends up being the real cowboy type.
Right.
Yeah. Why am I forgetting his name now?
Marvin Dorfler.
Marvin Dorfler.
Marvin, look out.
Marvin.
Does Marvin have CTE by the end of the movie, by the way?
He gets some hard hits. There's some hard hits in this movie. That's true.
Such a classic.
Great punch
what a
movie.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a single punch and then your lights are out.
Yeah, and with real kind of like cartoonish,
Yes,
old Western bar fight punches.
And Jack never once has to shake out his fist or anything afterwards. No damage to him.
No, but the arc of the punches, they're like full Popeye swings with like the most robust sort of impact sound effects possible.
So Gallo credits Martin Brest for everything, says like he really cracked the whip for me. He turned me into a good writer.
Rigorous as hell.
Right, exactly. He would always say like, try to twist this one more time, try to surprise me one more time, right? Like, don't just settle for essentially a rote version of this road trippy kind of movie.
Which is, it is the magic of this film, that every scene just plays out a little differently than you thought it would, whether it's the plot zagging or the character handles a traditional plot scene in a way you wouldn't expect in terms of the performance.
Now, DeNiro is first aboard.
Mm-hmm.
DeNiro, in his career, which is long and interesting, he has 2 Academy Awards. I don't know if you guys know that. At this point. Do you guys know that?
He got 2 within 5 years.
He sure did.
And 2 for characters very much like Jack Walsh, very funny and loose.
Right. He got 2 also just like undeniable Oscars.
Yeah.
Like it was like, yeah, of course he's winning for Raging Bull. Of course he's winning for Godfather. Anyway.
Right.
After all that, he does Once Upon a Time in America and The King of Comedy, both of which are like, well regarded now, but are kind of these like troubled things at the time, I feel like. The King of Comedy does okay. Right? Or did it not?
It was a huge flop.
It was a huge flop.
Scorsese talks about that.
Yeah, it was a
being
gigantic
movie
flop.
where he
Obviously, I know it was
destroyed.
like freak people out. Yeah.
No, critics called it the worst film of the year, and they were like,
It's an awesome
Scorsese's
movie,
lost
obviously.
it. It rules.
Right.
And Once Upon a Time in America was this very long, drawn-out production
Gets
that then
cut
gets
to pieces. It's,
So he's coming off of like two kind of follies.
Now, he is in The Mission in 1986, which is a tremendously boring and misguided movie in a lot of ways, but it's gorgeous. It wins the Palme d'Or.
Was
it gets
well
Oscar
received.
noms.
Yes.
It's got the most beautiful score.
But the most fascinating thing is then he swings into this period in the 80s where he's like cameo guy.
Interspersed with The Mission, it's a lot of supporting role. It's Brazil, Angel Heart, and The Untouchables are the ones that we're thinking of especially.
Right,
It's
where
like,
he's sort of like the looming figure in question.
Right.
He's the character the movie keeps talking about, but he's not on screen
he's
much.
good in all of those movies.
I would go as far as to say he's great in all three.
Right, but it is an interesting moment for him, and clearly he's decided, yes, I enjoy doing these bigger than life like cameo parts. Cool,
Yeah.
that's fine. Like I like doing that, but maybe it would be nice to do a funny movie
No,
like that people aren't completely bummed out watching.
That having been said, he's in this weird position where it's like, look, he's widely considered perhaps the greatest screen actor of his generation.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't alive in the 80s, but I think his rep was probably pretty strong.
Pretty fucking strong.
Yeah.
He has 2 Oscars under his belt that, as you said, no one can deny.
Right.
But you're like, what more does this guy have to prove, right? To sort of like hit that big, that young, that quickly.
Yeah.
Then it's like, so what are you doing now? Are you chasing your own shadow? And increasingly, I think there was this reputation of like, he's actually not bankable. He's a beloved actor. He's widely respected,
Right.
but he's like not a box office star. And some of his movies have gotten complicated. I think him swinging into those supporting sort of cameo-esque parts was also him taking all pressure off himself as a leading man in terms of his value as a star and just being like, I'm additive to these movies.
Yeah, I mean,
no one's going to hold it against me.
I would guess like Godfather 2 and Untouchables were by far his most successful movies at the box office, and he's not the lead in either one of them.
That's a good point.
No, it has to be. I mean, Taxi Driver did pretty well, and the other ones didn't really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, looking at the box office for these old movies can be hard, but
Yeah,
it was.
Taxi Driver did
it was
pretty
like a good hit for especially for a movie that's incredibly disturbing and violent.
Correct.
And,
One of your classic porno theater date movies. But he's already been in this headspace of like, maybe I need to do something lighter. Maybe I
Yes.
need to shake it up. This is a big thesis of mine, Alan, that we talked about before your screening, where I think this is the first Robert De Niro movie star movie. I'm not just talking about the way in which it is received. I think because at this point in time, his reputation was also so chameleonic. De Niro goes so deep. He'll do anything to transform himself for a role. He's so malleable. This is the first time he's kind of shedding layers and figuring out what his default on-screen persona is. Now later, 15, 20 years later, when there's the whole sort of like De Niro comedy wave, that is not riffing off of this. That is like parodying his tough guy dramatic work from earlier.
This is funny because it's Robert De Niro doing it.
Right, but I also think this movie paves the way for like what becomes his default screen persona in things like Heat.
Yeah.
Right? Like his Heat character has more in common with Jack Walsh than he does like 70s Pacino.
Right.
Where he's so fucking intense.
Yes.
He starts to figure out like, what am I like just kind of existing on screen? But I think he knew he needed to like expand. He wanted to do big very badly. He met with Penny Marshall a bunch. There were like a bunch of comedies like that, or like Lighter Fare, where he was like, can I play a nice guy? Can I be in a movie that isn't about me being dangerous or intense or scary or whatever it is?
Right.
Even King of Comedy, he shows that he's funny, but in a way that makes everyone upset. And he was like, I think he knew he had to figure out who like Robert De Niro above the title was in that kind of way.
Right. Obviously the big question is, who do you do? Brest is like, De Niro? Sure. I'm interested.
Yeah, great.
Like, but then
they say
who do you
he doesn't seem to totally fit the role as written, and he's like, here's my take. If Robert De Niro wants to do the movie,
I'll figure out
you rewrite the role.
Right. Like exactly. That's exactly it. Charles Grodin. Obviously, we needed people to read for it because it was a question of microchemistry, is how Brest put it.
And beyond that, they're immediately terrified of a co-star being intimidated by De Niro. You're like, even if you get the funniest guy in the world, is he going to feel insignificant holding his acting chops against De Niro? And if you try to get another actor of his stature, they're going to be funny.
Right. He reads a scene from Heaven Can Wait.
He watches the movie.
He does, but he says, "Oh no, right, you're right. Sorry."
Yes.
I remembered a scene in Heaven Can Wait, which Charles Grodin is very funny in.
So funny.
Where he just turned to another character and had a deadpan reaction that just knocked me off my chair.
Yeah.
So Brest is like, why is this not a guy that everyone's trying to get?
Grodin had a career that on a smaller scale was very similar to like Alan Arkin, where there was a period where they were a leading man.
Like Heartbreak Kid for Grodin. I'm trying to think,
Grodin's
they're both
stuff,
in Catch-22 together.
Right. Grodin's stuff did not hit as hard as Arkin's early stuff did. And then after a couple years, it's like Grodin is a super reliable, like comedy version of what De Niro was doing in the 80s. He will pop up as the best friend or the CIA agent Ishtar, whatever it is,
Right.
But it's like that was his zone, was this guy had a leading man run. The movies are well respected, but they weren't successful. I guess the audience doesn't like him as a leading man.
Sure.
Have him show up for a couple scenes and be funny next to Steve Martin.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Warren Beatty or all these guys.
And also he's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Like is it worth working with this guy if he's not going to make you enough money?
He's a curmudgeon.
Yeah.
He's not a pain in the ass in the way that Hoffman is.
Sure.
Right.
And also his comedy persona now is curmudgeon. He's one of these guys who's more famous for being a talk show guest than he is for anything else.
Right.
And his bit on talk shows is being like, I don't want to be here. What are we talking about? Which is pretty like niche.
So Brest says the best thing about Brooke Grodin is that he's not afraid of De Niro.
Yeah.
They would keep doing screen tests with De Niro, and every actor was so intimidated by him.
Mm-hmm.
So Grodin obviously is not. Grodin reads the script as like, it was immediately clear if I was offered this part, it would be the best one I'd ever played in the movies. Like Heartbreak Kid, he considers maybe his best work at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, lead role for him.
Yeah.
But this was more dimensional, more unexpected, more human than any other part I'd done. So he does like an audition where they read all their scenes together. It's not just like a scene.
No, they
do the whole movie, at least their parts, right? Which is, 75% of the movie.
Yes.
2 weeks later, he's phoned to say it's between Robin Williams and you, which is kind of an intimidating thing to say to him. Like, Good Morning Vietnam is the year before, right?
Yeah.
Or, well, maybe
it came out the year before. He wouldn't have seen it yet. So, like Moscow on the Hudson, we're talking
This
about.
is the exact point where Williams is trying to make the opposite transition of De Niro of, can I add a little more weight to my comedy?
Right.
Yeah.
he does another version of this 3-hour audition, similar to the first. Okay.
Yeah.
Paramount doesn't like it. They're like, this isn't starry enough. This isn't funny enough. Casey Silver, the VP of production, is basically like, we need someone else. Like, this isn't a movie star. So they do another series of what Brest calls sham auditions. Judge Reinhold, Sharon Stone apparently came in.
Well,
Sharon Stone was not at the level to do
this
that.
This is the thing. So the studio really wanted Robin Williams or Cher. Cher was coming off a number of hits.
Yeah, the Cher thing is not in the dossier, so I wonder how made up that is.
No,
because that's a famous thing.
It's been discussed so many times.
Right. Obviously, Cher was some studio notion of like...
She was coming off a bunch of hits, and they thought like, oh, does this movie have more juice if there's also sexual chemistry between them, right?
Yes, exactly.
The way Martin Brest frames it is that like he and DeNiro had made a pact that they wanted Grodin. They knew the studios did not want to sign off on Grodin.
Yes.
They kept making Grodin do all these screen tests where he'd do the entire movie.
Yes.
And then they were sort of setting other people up as fall guys.
Judge Reinhold is the one who's like, that fucker Marty Brest made me do an audition with Robert De Niro who did not look up from the script one time.
Right.
Like, I could tell it was basically like them being like, oh, we tried this guy, didn't work. Oh, we tried this guy, didn't work. And I had just scored
really hard in his last movie. And even Sharon Stone is them being like, look, we're being flexible. We're considering every single option.
And look,
do you notice none of these are working?
Right.
Is this when Bruce Willis came in?
I don't know. I don't know about that one.
No, because it's I found this Marilyn Beck in a column from September of 1987. Bruce Willis hopes to make a film during his coming moonlighting hiatus, but thus far he has nothing set. Willis's agent, Arnold Rifkin, confirmed discussions for his client to star in Martin Brest's Midnight Run.
Wow.
But Rifkin added that, quote, no offer was ever made, and I'm told an offer is now out to Charles Grodin. We'll have to see what happens.
Right. Rifkin trying to pump up his client.
Because Universal wouldn't pull the trigger on Grodin, it was like, well, first Paramount and then Universal.
Yeah, when does it?
Paramount said hard no. Yeah. Then it goes from turnaround to Paramount to Universal, and they're like, we want Grodin, and Universal's like, let's open this up to more people. So then there was an additional wave. That's when Stone and Reinhold and all those guys came in. So it went through two different studios of both of them refusing Grodin, but Universal was less absolute about it. They were like, let's keep seeing other people. So it's a fucking good script with the director of the hottest comedy in years.
Yes.
And the most respected screen actor. And it's this jump ball where every fucking agent must be like, maybe I'm the guy who can send his client in there and have them kill a midnight run and cinch the part.
Right.
Because even though it was sort of an open secret across town, they want Grodin, but it's probably not going to happen. There's this famous story I love about Grodin that he was in acting class with Gene Wilder, with Uta Hagen, one of like the legends of acting.
Yes.
I mean, the other anecdote I love from this is that he one day told Gene Wilder, like, they were talking about their careers and their ambitions, and he's like, buddy, you got to lower your expectations.
Right.
And he was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're not going to be a movie star. Look at your face.
Right.
Like, listen to your voice. You're not like the kind of guy.
Wow.
Was just sort of like, I have the right features and you don't.
That's rough.
Which, yeah, is like an asshole-ish move, but also he's like, right, like Gene Wilder kind of cites that as like incentivizing him to prove him wrong. But the other thing talking about Charles Grodin being difficult was in that class, he'd like sit back with like the newspaper and read it openly while other people were like tearing their heart out and stuff.
Right.
And at some point, Uta Hagen pointed to him and she was like, look at what he's doing. This is compelling. And then she made the entire acting class come around him. And she's like, this is an interesting technique. And he was like, I wasn't doing anything. I was genuinely just bored in the class. And then she was like, we're all compelled to see what his next move is. And he yawned. And she was like, yes, this is it. And it's so much of his acting process there, right? Is like the thing that it sounds like he kept doing in all these screen tests is other people were trying to like top DeNiro.
Yes.
And he would take 30 seconds on a response.
It's just funny.
He just threw everything underhand, and he just seemed completely uninterested in trying to impress anybody. As much as he very much wanted this part, he wasn't like groveling for it.
Film began production in October 1987. It comes out in July 1988, but it was a long 17-week shoot. Tons of locations. Famously, the cliff scene is shot in New Zealand.
Yes.
Because the water was warmer.
Yes.
So they had to fucking fly to New Zealand, but obviously they also shot in New York, LA, Chicago, Arizona, Sedona, all
it's
these
like
places.
genuinely 10 locations.
It's
and
a
mostly
really
in order.
crazy run.
Yeah. A midnight
kind
run.
of a midnight run.
Kind of a
weird.
midnight run. Yeah.
An assistant director and much of the camera crew quit 5 weeks into production.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably because Brest is like a really meticulous pain in the ass. Like that seems to be the vibe. He kind of cops to it.
Yeah, also coming off of Beverly Hills Cop, where like Eddie Murphy threw the script out and just did different shit every take, and it ended up working.
Right.
He every day is like he's sort of become the Kubrick of comedy, where he's like, we're gonna do everything 100 times because I'm waiting for you to do something that surprises me. And Yaphet Kotto spoke very openly about how miserable he was making this movie.
It really helps his performance where his character is constantly miserable.
And I don't think it was intentional. I don't think Brest was trying to
Brest doesn't seem like an asshole. He does seem like just a pain in the ass.
Right. And he was like, I worked so hard to try to get what I thought Brest wanted. And Brest would go like, okay, now try doing the serious version of it.
Right.
And he's like, I thought you wanted the funny version. And then I do it serious. He'd push me further in that direction. But then Yaphet Kotto, when he saw the movie, was like, I could not believe how good it was.
Right.
He was right about everything. And like these pieces where I was like every day on set, this is incompatible. How is what I am doing now going to cut together with what I did an hour ago, let alone what I shot 2 weeks ago? And he was like, he knew that he needed every single option. And Brest, one of the reasons this movie went very over budget was he like at a time where it cost money to print film, where people would sit there with their script supervisors and when a take looked good, they'd mark print it, and you only print the ones that feel like it's a great take to beginning to end. And he was like, print fucking everything. Universal's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I got Robert De Niro in a fucking movie. I think I'm not going to print footage of Robert De Niro on camera. But also, he's like, sometimes you watch a take that otherwise isn't usable, but there is a twitch on a face in response to a line that doesn't happen on the other takes. And that thing is like fucking gold.
And he even keeps the camera running often like after the take is over. And some of that shit is some of the best stuff in the movie. Jack like taking the badge out of his pocket and turning around and flashing that's just De Niro fucking around after the take.
Yes.
Mosley saying, I'm going to have a heart attack here. That's Yaphet Kotto just losing his mind.
Like actually getting mad.
Yaphet Kotto was straight up sick the entire time of filming too. He claims he had a fever every day he was filming.
Yeah.
The way Brest puts it is the movie was written to death and they would shoot like a master, of like, let's do the script exactly as we have it. And then, improvise in every direction imaginable. The sex with the chicken run in the boxcar.
Yes.
They apparently were just like, we don't really have a great way out of this scene or whatever. And Grodin like came up with that after a while.
He says, you need to do whatever you can to make Bobby laugh.
Make him laugh.
Because we have to convince people that this is the moment when the relationship turns.
And Brest was like, that's so funny, but we can't use that. And then was like, well, maybe I can use that.
And that becomes his whole philosophy on the movie is anytime there's something where I go, that's so funny, but obviously we can't use it. It means it has to be in the film. Make this the movie where all that kind of stuff does make the cut.
The way De Niro puts it is it's like swimming the English Channel. When you're in the middle of it, you're like, what the hell is going on, essentially, right? Like, and then at the end, you're like, no, I guess that was how you had to do it. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. De Niro apparently would call Marty the principal. Like, oh, the principal's coming, you're in trouble.
Everyone on set called it.
De Niro came up with it.
Yeah,
it became the nickname.
Sure. Yeah.
And as you say...
Yeah, when he comes out from behind the camera, everyone's like, oh, God, what am I going to fucking get yelled about?
Right, exactly. Now, apparently they did not have a finished ending while they were in production. And Brest was constantly hounding Gallo, being like, what's the fucking ending? Like, have you figured this out? And Gallo says, finally, I realized I've been in my room for 4 days in a hotel in Sedona. My room looked like the Son of Sam, paper all over the place. I was chain smoking. I said, I need some air. I took my golf clubs. You can imagine where this is going. I went to get some air just to move my body around. I knock on John Ashton's door. That's the guy who plays Dorfler. And he's like, get your clubs. So we go. The bus of the crew is leaving, followed by Marty, the principal, in his car. Mr. Brest. He sees us teeing off on the first hole. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He swung around at that car and started screaming at me like I'm a kid. George Gallo, sole screen credit. You're on the fucking golf course. We have no ending and you're on the golf course. Maybe he is a little bit of an asshole. He was going berserk, then he heads off in his car, and the whole crew starts cheering and whistling like a football game. I'll never forget that. Sole screen credit. He knew how to get me, but I did finish the round.
Laser
It's a great
precision.
story.
Yes. Oh, it's so good. And the ending of this movie couldn't be better. It's so perfect and simple.
It's so perfect and simple. You're kind of like, you didn't have this ending? Like, what a great ending.
Like a classic, the movie was written backwards from the ending.
And my wife was like, I mean, he's going to let him go, right? And I'm like, of course he's going to let him go. Like when she was watching it with me. Like,
but the execution of it.
And,
yes.
And the details in it like seem so obviously like seeded throughout. You know, the runner about the watch, and he's already given away the Duke's watch after they steal the truck.
The money, the sort of notion
there's
of
a
paying
bit.
him
That's
off.
another thing that I didn't notice until like 5 or 6 viewings into it. Maybe not even until we saw it together, which is in the bus station when he's like frisking the Duke.
Yeah.
To see like if he has any money to help pay for the bus ticket. He's like, do you have any money? And the Duke says, yeah, I've got money.
Yeah.
And he looks so pleased with himself.
He keeps saying it throughout the film. And it's one of the great lines where he said, I know you said you had money, but you didn't say you had money. And it's just the emphasis. He says the same thing 2 times.
Yeah. De Niro says so many lines in this movie twice, and it's different the second time.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
great.
De Niro at this point, a bit famous for saying the same line multiple times.
You talking to me?
Enthusiasms.
There's a couple words he mispronounces in this movie.
Okay.
Oh, it's when they do the litmus configuration. Yes, he stumbles over configuration. And it's such a nice moment because you're like, De Niro was impressed that Grodin is so good at this when he's been the one bullshitting his way through environments the whole time, that he's actually caught a little off guard and he stumbles.
I'm just thinking about how, just Farina, how he's always like to Philip Baker Hall, like, sit down, relax, have a glass of milk. Like, he just keeps saying that to him while he's
Glass of milk and eat a sandwich.
discussing
Have a
murder.
cream soda, some fucking thing.
Some fucking thing.
Every Farina line in this movie has one great specific, and they're none of them are obscure.
Yeah.
But like, if they don't do what I want, I'm gonna hit them all with a fucking blowtorch. I'm gonna
my
stab you in the
God.
neck with a fucking pencil.
The heightening.
Right.
Yeah.
Have a glass of milk. Like everything, there's one specific that comes in of like there is this man has an attention to detail.
Yeah.
David, do you have your 1987 ballot?
Oh, yeah, sure.
My debate has always been how many acting nominations do I give this movie?
87's a really hot year, my friend. That is a tough year to squeeze people in on.
Do you have this in any
88,
category?
you mean, right?
88 ceremony.
Yeah,
for
not
80s.
87. Sorry. Yeah.
No, but the movie comes out in 88.
No, it's an 88
You're right.
movie.
I'm
You're
sorry.
right. You're
I'm
right.
sorry.
I have this nominated for, a bunch of awards. I mean, in my ballot. Yeah. What do you mean?
Where do you have it?
Well, picture,
Uh-huh.
director,
Screenplay.
actor, screenplay.
Who do you nominate
which
for
actor?
So right here I have De Niro in lead and Grodin in supporting, which is cheating, but not entirely, because Grodin is not in the first chunk of the movie.
But it's not that long.
No, but I want to put them both here in my ballot.
And here's the reason why I would put them both in lead actor.
So you can get one of the many great supporting performances.
Farina, right?
Farina, but also tempted to put Kodo in it.
Kodo is the one where I'd be kind of tempted.
I want to do 4 nominations in 2 categories, 2 double nom categories,
You should. I mean, I think you should do that.
right? And I'm going to call up the Academy,
But
bring Brain.
it's a really good 5 lead.
Who's your 5 lead, your 5 supporting?
De Niro, Midnight Run, Hoskins, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis in a film called Die Hard. It's like an art film from Bulgaria. You wouldn't have heard of it. Forrest Whitaker in Bird, incredible performance.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Irons in Dead Ringers.
God damn it.
That's
Really good-
okay.
Really good movies.
Okay, and you put Grodin in supporting.
Along with Alan Rickman in Die Hard, Michael Keaton in Beetlejuice, Kevin Kline in A Fish Called Wanda, and then Dean Stockwell in Married to the Mob, which is a true, I just love that performance. That's maybe the quote-unquote weakest, although I think he got like an Oscar nom for it, right? Like, it's not like it was it's a good performance.
All right, so hold
But
on.
also, we've covered almost all those movies now, which is wow.
Maybe it's time to do Charles Crichton and knock A Fish Called Wanda
And
off the list.
Cronenberg.
I
and
would
Crichton.
want to be on the Wanda episode if you ever do Crichton, which will obviously happen.
Here he goes. He's
Here
picking
he
these.
goes.
See, he's not retired.
He doesn't need to be in space.
I will still
Fish Called
never
Wanda,
remember
great movie.
when it was like Hitchcock in March Madness one year, and I just sort of texted you like, "Well, if Hitchcock wins, I'll do Rear Window, right?" And you're like,
This was your bit for a while.
You
was-
would
"Well, it started
the
out
most
sincere,
obvious,
and
right.
then it became a bit." You
Right.
know, when I realized, okay, I'm punching above my weight.
If you twist my arm, I would do Jurassic Park. Is the
Yes.
kind of thing you would text us.
we should do Alfred Hitchcock. Let's do him right now. pause this podcast.
Do you remember how much hand-wringing there was to figure out how to split him up from March Madness?
We briefly had this thought of like, could we make like 4 Hitchcock movements, right? Like, could we do kind of like 4 different decades or whatever? Yeah, that was fun to think about.
All right, so you, just not to go into too much of a tangent because it is related. You mentioned Hoskins before. I assume you guys have seen the screen test for Eddie Valiant where it's Joey Pants.
Yes. Right.
Okay. So A, I'm trying to imagine what Roger Rabbit would have been like with Joey Pants. And then B, Joey Pants allegedly was one of the many people who was trying to get in to play the Duke.
Desperately.
How do you think he would have been in both of those roles?
He's a really good actor.
Yeah.
And he's got the energy required for both. Him as Eddie Valiant, that's an ornery movie. Like, he would be loud and ornery.
I think his energy is too similar to Roger Rabbit.
Yeah,
I think that's the problem.
Like, Hoskins is deadpan in that movie. Like, which is, I mean, obviously Hoskins is just wonderful in the
I'm not
film.
saying it'd be a bad film, but it's like there's no way to improve upon that. And I think the same thing with Midnight Run. No one could have played the Duke better, but also no one could have played Mark Scone better. Like it's, but yes, no, Brest really wanted him to play one of Serrano's goons. So he had the in with Brest.
Sure.
And then he was like, I want to play the Duke. And it was like, I really want Grodin.
Right.
But you can read for this one. This might.
I mean, imagine how the studio reacts to, no, okay, I'll drop Grodin. Joe Pantoliano?
Just like one of the best Pants performances.
It is.
It's just perfect application.
He looks like he belongs in that office.
Yes.
He does.
He looks like he lives in that office.
Yeah, I mean,
full time.
He has the desperation, the manic desperation of this guy down so hard. Anytime he's negotiating the numbers with people and he slips up and he says a little more than he should, it's fucking.
I mean, there's that bit early on when in his first scene when Jack is complaining that he's trying to like reduce the rate, and he turns to Jack Kehoe, Jerry, and he's like, does that phone ever ring?
He can't even finish a sentence. This every time he's doing like Nicholas Fane stuff. I'm in this off. Would you need to understand? But even the thing when DeNiro comes in and he asks for his money, and then he goes like, Jack, we agreed to a lower number, whatever. And he's like, Jack pushes on back for a millisecond and he immediately folds.
No, you're right. 1,200.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It was 1,200.
God, even down to how he's balding, but has still kind of like some long hair in the back.
Right, yeah.
It's perfect.
I've had many conversations with Joey Pants over the years about his baldness, his hair, wigs.
Yes.
Like how when he's playing a part where it's supposed to be a wig versus when he's playing a part where it's supposed to be his real hair. Like he is like a wig master at this point.
Well, the Ralphie wig obviously is not revealed to be a wig until spoiler for The Sopranos, Ralphie doesn't make it.
Wait, what?
Alan's never watched.
But was he aware from the beginning, like this is a hairpiece?
I think he was. I mean, I'm
interesting to consider.
I don't remember if we've discussed that because the last interview I did with him for Sopranos was before Ralphie dies.
He also said recently that he based it off of Christopher Nolan, that he had just done Memento, and he was like, "This is the
swoopy hair of Nolan's, obviously, though it's further back on the head than Chris's." But and he based on Ridley Scott's Gladiator as well. The character's constantly,
He's got the Dan Flashes shirts, right? Like the very loud expression pattern shirts.
Wait, that is such a good call out. Yeah.
And then like the combination of like that with the ties and the suspenders, but no jacket.
The Argyle socks. He keeps the money in the Argyle socks.
Like there's this part of him that looks like a shitty birthday party magician.
Yeah.
And he's trying to intimidate everyone, but he just can't fully commit to it. And you started with this guy being in the hole of he's overextended himself. I mean, this movie, it's such an efficient setup, right? But you open just like fucking DeNiro turning down a hallway, looking like $100 million. Oh, this is going to be a movie where DeNiro has a gun and he's cool, right? Where he's like a cool action star.
Right. He's a badass. You don't fuck with him.
He's trying to pick this lock. He drops the fucking paperclip, bullet goes right above his head. It's a thing I love of this movie setting up basically with like, from minute one, this guy's on borrowed time.
Right.
It's not really talked about that much. He says it once, but like, I almost died tonight.
Right.
Like, this is my breaking point. The only reason I'm still alive is because I'm clumsy, because I dropped a thing.
It's also like just emblematic of like his quote unquote professionalism, which
Yeah.
is like he's not unprofessional.
No.
But half the shit that he does right is by mistake.
Yes.
Or weird luck or
Right.
whatever.
And then
Like,
even when he gets
that's
himself
the
out of
rung
this
he's
situation
on.
successfully, it's like, and then you got to fucking deal with Marvin. Like Marvin's always there meeting
fucking
you,
Marvin.
giving you fucking chin music. That's the first like 2-3 minutes of this movie. That whole dynamic is set up. This is what this guy's daily life is like. Marvin's always on his tail. He goes to the precinct. They all know him. They all have in-jokes with him. This weird sense of like, why isn't this guy a cop? Right? He has an odd relationship with the police because it feels like he should just be one of them.
Right.
And especially with Robert De Niro, who I guess like his biggest police roles are to come, but you're like, that's a guy you'd buy
Sure.
Yeah.
in this
course.
type of role. And then he goes over to fucking Pantaleone's office, Paliano's office, Panettone's office. And that is where the movie starts to like truly flower.
And it's just, I mean, it's such a triumph of casting because it's like it's like the 27 Yankees of character actors are playing, like, you know, you see Joey Pants, you instantly know who this guy is. You see Yaphet Kotto, you instantly know who that guy is. Farina, everybody.
Dropping Tracy Walter at the diner late in the movie for 10 seconds really feels like them just showing off. Like at that point, they're just like, I don't know, we had to, right?
Yep.
But yes, it's 80s character actor Avengers.
Yes.
Jack Kehoe's so good. One of these things where like every guy in this movie is interesting, so you're paying attention, which pays off when the guys end up working themselves more into the plot than you would imagine. Jack Kehoe's established.
the guy who keeps wanting to get donuts. To be
Right. And you're just like, well, it's just kind of funny that you have this guy with this hangdog energy there, and you're like, no, but he's the snitch. This is important.
It is important, but
You need to be tracking him.
is
And
so
then the
funny
guys
that-
in the FBI van eventually figure this out, and it's just one thing after another.
the thing of like, oh, you seem stressed out. Do you want donuts? Yeah. You need to work yourself up. Do you want some donuts?
Right.
Like just that.
Well, when he starts doing it, I'm like, this is just a funny character detail. This guy goes to donuts for everything. And then you start to learn donuts is code word for he's ratting.
Right. He's going to
calling.
make a collect call. Right.
The movie's so smart about finding ways to, through characterization and like charm, make every little detail memorable for one reason or another so that you are keeping track of everything.
The plot of this film
Mhm.
is that is set up here. Is that he's got to go get the Duke,
Mhm.
Jonathan Mardukas,
Mhm.
a mob accountant.
Mm-hmm.
He is a mob accountant,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
He was working for an accounting firm. He didn't realize that their main client was the mob.
Right. He embezzled $15 million from the Chicago outfit.
He only realized too late how long he had been spending helping the mob hide their money. So then he started funneling it into charities.
Right. And then so he skipped bail. There's a $450,000 bail he has skipped. So Walsh has to go get him within 5 days. Walsh is like, you got to give me $100,000. And, all this kind of things ensues. So
Pantaleano put up the money because he was like, this is going to be a big payday. But he didn't realize until after he had put up the money that it was the Duke, how high the stakes are of the situation, how many people are going to be after him. And he's basically like, I default if I don't deliver him and my business goes under. You need to do this. De Niro's like, I almost died tonight. If I'm doing this, it's my last job. And it's a midnight run. It's easy. This guy's a fucking wimp.
right. The idea being right, like how hard could this be? This guy's not scary. He's an accountant. Right.
But Walsh is just at his breaking point, and his thing has always been, I want to go off and like just start a restaurant, live a normal
he
life.
wants to have a coffee shop.
And
essentially.
everyone tells him, like, there is no version of you that will ever have a normal life. There's no fucking getting out for you. I cannot see you being happy.
No.
But he's like saying, this is it. It's $100,000 or I walk
That's
away.
seed
Fuck
money
you. I
for
don't
me.
owe you anything.
Can I
It
ask a
needs to be
question?
the life-changing amount. Yeah.
So
Still waiting.
he has to.
Yeah, he's going to keep on for the whole record.
Charged in L.A.,
Yes, this is the question I've always had.
but
Please.
he lives in New York.
Yeah.
And
Serrano's in Vegas.
and Serrano's in Vegas. And it's unclear to me why, like,
He doesn't live
why
in New
he's
York.
charged in L.A.
He's hiding out.
He's hiding in New York. But
Yeah.
here's the.
but his wife lives there.
no.
That's
He's
sort of their pied a terror.
Oh,
you
okay.
imagine.
But-
yeah.
okay,
Or they're
well,
staying with friends.
the
or-
issue is this.
Sure.
They've
That makes
both been
sense.
hiding out in New York.
When
Got it.
Mosley pulls him off the street and into the car and they have the banter about the sunglasses, Mosley says, I want to take him into federal court. I don't want him being brought up on some bullshit local charge.
Yeah.
What is the local charge in Los Angeles that he has been arrested for?
I can explain this
Okay,
very
please.
simply.
Great.
The U.S. federal court system is divided into 9 districts. Nevada and California are in the same 9th district, which is headquartered in California. Like, that's what it is. He's being charged for Vegas crimes federally, because these are federal crimes. They're interstate crimes, and he's being brought to trial in California. Like, that's what it has to be, right?
No, but he's implying that he doesn't, like, it's some, like, minor charge that he was arrested for. That Eddie... I don't know. It's one part of the movie I've never been able to figure out.
Sure. What is,
But like, I assume like that's why he needs to be in California, right? Like that's right. That is the purpose of this movie, for getting him to California.
Right.
That's where he was arrested, and that's where he skipped bail.
The feds want to use the Duke to finally take down Serrano. That's their hope. And Serrano wants to do anything he can to make sure that the Duke doesn't live long enough to help them.
It's not because that's where it's because he committed federal crimes in the 9th District of America, which is, he did it in Vegas. His crimes are in Vegas.
Serrano or Duke we're talking about?
The Duke.
Okay.
Yeah. Serrano is a Chicago mobster.
He had to have been arrested in Los Angeles, because why else would Eddie Moscone be his bail bondsman?
Right. Good question. But yeah, that's fine, right? But or he was going to be charged there, and he skipped bail.
Okay,
like, right? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it matters. It's just the one part that I've never been able to put 2 and 2 together.
There's a lot of stuff in this movie that if you slowed down, you would kind of be like, well, that doesn't seem practical, or that doesn't follow that, but it doesn't really matter at all.
Yeah,
sure.
Not that this is a sloppily written movie, but across town,
but it's fun watching
across country.
Jack Walsh's sort of like all his techniques at the beginning, him calling the woman, pretending to be Mosley, getting the record of the tape, tracking the address back.
This is the quasi-illegal shit that bounty hunters do.
Right.
Yes. Where you're like, that's against the law.
And that process stuff is fun. And for this chunk of the movie, you're like, this guy is good at his job. How is Charles Grodin going to outwit him? Right?
That's true. Then he annoys him to death.
Yeah.
Right. just set it all out. Of course, you have the Duke, right? Robert De Niro wants him to get Robert De Niro's bail bonds paid, right? Yeah. Obviously, Joe Pantoliano wants him for the same reason, right? Yaphet Kotto wants him because he's a Fed who wants to bring him, who needs him for this trial.
Alonzo Mosley.
Correct. Yaphet Kotto's character. Yep. Dennis Farina wants him to off the key witness.
Yes.
He is, a mobster. John Ashton wants him. Martin Dorfler wants him because he is basically constantly being pitted against Jack Walsh as a rival.
He's the Del Taco. And it's, basically when it takes De Niro more than a day and Pantoliano hasn't heard from him, he's like, I'm calling up Marvin. I'm going to break the bank for you. $25,000.
Well, because Pants has real stakes because he'll lose his business.
Everything. He put up his bail bond.
Yeah.
So these are the 5 sort of elements that want the Duke, right? I have set them all out.
Yeah.
And this movie is just sort of them constantly bumping into each other as Jack's dragging him across.
So like when they're in Chicago, Mosley has them arrested, and then Serrano's stupid goons start shooting at the FBI, and Jack and the Duke are able to get away.
And Serrano basically isn't leaving his like penthouse in Vegas where he sits with Sidney, who's this sort of like sad sack fixer man.
And who's like the kind of lawyer who's like, no, if Serrano's like, I want to kill that guy. So he's like, I can't hear that. I mean, he's not, that's the vibe.
But he's got these 2 stupid goons, his Bebop and Rocksteady, who he sends out, who are the ones who are actively going after and wooing Jack Walsh directly and saying like, we'll fucking pay you 4 times as much.
And in a brilliant choice by, of course, former Chicago cop Dennis Farina, a real, beef on whack of a person. We've talked about him from Michael Mann movies and stuff, is that he doesn't yell. He's always just like, listen, if you don't do it, I'll stab you with a pencil. All right? He's not doing the like, I'm not the crazy, scary guy.
It's another day at the office.
Yes.
It's what makes him terrifying.
The scene in the limo.
Yes.
He's like, I came here to tell you 2 things. 1 is you're going to die tonight.
Right.
2 is
I'm going to murder your whole family.
I'm going to go home, going to have a nice meal.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to find your wife. I'm going to kill her too. And it's so matter of fact.
Yes.
It's terrifying.
I do think this is, I won't say greatest. It is my favorite Chicago accent committed to film. And even amongst the Dennis Farina canon is something about the dialogue in this film and the way he's able to hit certain words. If I never need to, for the sake of comedy, do a shitty Chicago accent, the phrase I repeat in my head is stab you in the neck with a fucking pencil. Yep.
I think he says stab you through your heart.
Stab you through the heart.
You
with
understand
a
me?
pencil, with a fucking pencil.
Is this more on number one? Put more on number 2 on the phone.
Yep. Yeah, we haven't really talked about more on number 1 and more on number 2 yet. They're great.
They're great.
They're great.
Okay, so all right, what happens? Okay, like you say,
Mosley
Walsh seems good at his
pulls
job.
him aside, is like, don't fuck this up for us. And he's just like, I don't work for you. I don't
Right.
like cops. I don't like the government.
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about. He's making fun of their sunglasses.
Right.
Mosley hates him immediately. Not only is this guy like obstructing justice in his mind, but the guy is like fucking having a laugh at him at the same time, right? And then, of course, quietly steals his badge and starts using it.
I had a weird breakthrough with this movie a few months ago because we'd watched it again.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like the whole family's seen it, so we watch it periodically.
4K re-release came out the last couple of months.
And not long after, we did like our umpteenth rewatch of Casablanca.
Mhm.
And you watch them in that order and like, holy shit, Jack Walsh is Rick Blaine from Casablanca, the guy who once believed in something.
The former idealist, right, who then got screwed over. And
He
doesn't
is
even
now
want to
out
talk
for
about
himself.
it. Right.
He is great
Now-
with a quip. He's
and-
got a
and
line
Rick
for
is
everything.
one step ahead of Jack in that he got to start the restaurant that
Yes.
Jack wants to
Yes,
start.
but
And
he
it
wants to
even
be rich.
ends with guys in an airport together who have improbably
The-
become
the,
friends.
The bond has occurred.
Yes.
Right, yes.
And similarly, the heart of this movie is the notion that Jack basically let his wife and daughter get away for their own good.
Yeah.
Right? That like when you set up the my wife, my daughter don't talk to me thing anymore, you're like, what did this guy do to fuck things up? Or is he like an absentee father? Did he run away?
Right.
And instead you get to that scene, which we will talk about later.
Oh my gosh.
That is so heartbreaking where you're like, this guy basically knew he had to leave them.
Right, because he's such a mess.
Right.
And because they were in possibly danger.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You could be better taken care of by the exact type of guys who ruined
Right.
my life.
Right.
That
Corrupt
that
cops.
he has in this very like Rick kind of way
Yeah.
made this sacrifice in his mind of like the ultimate expression of love is to like
Yes.
make sure you never see me ever
Yeah,
again.
and at the same time, as a result of that, I will stick my neck out for no one. I will
Right.
not help anybody. And then in the end, he like rediscovers the sort of joie de vivre of being a cop. He's so excited to be
Yeah.
getting the wire put on him.
Right. And you watch this movie and you don't think the first time, oh, there's obviously some tragic backstory for Jack Walsh that's going to get teased out. You're like, this is default Robert De Niro kind of tough guy shit. Fuck
Right.
you, don't talk to me. You buy it just as sort of like a persona. They tease it out so fucking well. I saw Monkey Man yesterday with my friend,
Right.
which is an incredibly okay movie.
Agreed.
And is most frustrating, I would say, on a plot level. Like, it works as an action movie, and the extra 30 plus minutes of like story shit are not that compelling. But it also very early sets up like he's on some revenge mission. What's the reason? And you get flashes of stuff, and you're like, okay, I think I basically know the shape of what is driving this guy.
Right.
And yet, an hour in the movie, like grinds to a halt and is like, now we're going to explain everything. And you're like, none of the details that you are now taking tens of minutes to spell out to me are surprising. I basically could infer all of this versus the deliberateness with which you get information reveals on Jack. It takes maybe 30 minutes before the wife comes up. Then when you go to the house, you get more about it. He doesn't even make the Serrano connection until the train, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like the boxcar, like it's so deliberate. And every time, because it's just De Niro, because part of his persona is this guy doesn't like talking, you're sort of like mapping it onto De Niro on talk shows. He doesn't really want to open up.
Right.
Where you're like, yeah, I think this guy's told me everything I need to know. I have a complete picture of him.
Right.
And then every 20 minutes he'll be like, there's like slightly more to the story. And you just realize how tragic this fucking guy is.
The watch thing,
The watch.
too, is a
The
way
watch
that
thing is
they
the
kind of from
screenwriting
the
shorthand.
beginning
Yeah.
Right. That's
are
brilliant.
showing him.
But that sort of invisible setup where you're like, what's part of this guy's deal? He looks like he smells bad.
Yeah,
He's got one jacket and his watch doesn't work. Like, it feels like a funny character quirk.
sure.
And then you're like, this guy's entire life is this watch.
Yeah.
It's all symbolized on this one fucking broken watch he refuses to take off.
Right.
Ugh.
So he gets the Duke.
He gets the Duke pretty quickly using his, like you say, bounty hunting skills.
Yeah. Terrified of the dog, which I love. Just
Yes.
like, this guy is an invincible action hero.
No.
He's going to hide out in a shower and still try to arrest him, but be like, you got to take the dog away first.
And it's if you're the Duke and you're a fugitive and your dog is barking at a bathroom door, don't you just leave the house
Yes.
and like head to the airport?
The woman that DeNiro calls, who then he tapes the call.
Yeah.
That's-
She's already warned him that someone's coming for him.
Is that the woman they're staying with in New York?
No.
Okay.
She's the woman who like he called when he was arrested. Like it has not occurred to anyone in law enforcement other than Jack Walsh to actually look at the booking sheet and see who he called and see what her deal is.
Right. And he was able to get the booking sheet because the cops like him at that one precinct. These are the reasons why I love rewatching this movie is every time there are like another 2 connections I make.
Yeah.
You're obviously like 40 viewings ahead of me.
Yes.
So you're closer to the complete puzzle.
Yep. I'm here for all of your questions except the one about what the charge was for the Duke.
Someday you'll crack it.
Yes.
And that's when they give you the Pulitzer.
Yes.
I have a daughter, 3-year-old.
Congratulations.
Alan, I know it's probably been a few years since you were parenting a toddler, but you might remember that when you want them to do something, they stall, right? And there's sort of a brilliance to how they stall.
Yes.
Like, it's time to get, go take a bath. And they're like, I want to get that one toy. And you're like, well, okay, if it gets you to the bath, that's what you're thinking. And they're like, I'm going to get this toy and then I'm going to ask to do some other bullshit, right?
Yep.
That is what the Duke is doing for the next hour, 45 minutes of the movie. But you're almost always kind of believing his bullshit.
Well, this is the calculation I love. Is he arrests the Duke and then he basically doesn't really talk a complete sentence straight until he gets on the plane.
Yes.
Right? Like he's just kind of like sullenly like a teenager who's being dragged to some fucking event. Just being like, oh, this sucks. I hate this. But
if you watch the scene when they're driving to the airport and he realizes this is not an FBI agent, he's lying.
Right.
You can see the light going on in Grodin like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not in as much trouble as I thought I was.
He's strategizing.
I can get one over on this guy.
He's
making
making
moves,
moves.
this guy.
But then he doesn't really make a play until the plane. And because he has said so little up until that point, that first time you're watching this movie, you go, well, obviously, the comedic setup of this movie is that Grodin is going to be the dilemma.
Right.
But maybe the problem is he's the most annoying man in the world in genuine neuroses.
Yes.
So I watch it the first time. I buy
you
his
really
plane
buy
fake
that
out.
he doesn't want to be on the plane. To the extent that later when
He's
obviously
flying.
it's revealed, when he's flying the plane, you're kind of scandalized.
Yeah.
You're like, I thought that really was his one
The
weakness.
audience feels as offended as DeNiro does. Because even past the flight breakdown,
Right.
the next couple of moves, you start to go like, this guy's fucking with him. He's a little stinker. He's Bugs Bunny.
Yep.
He's deliberately trying to piss him off.
Yes.
It's not just that he's accidentally annoying him with his neuroses, but you still kind of go like, well, the plane thing must have been.
The plane thing has to be the
Kernel of
one
truth.
inviolable real. But one, because he plays it so well.
He did what you did in real life where he does the nail biting and the hand stuff.
The way it like kind of builds and then erupts.
Right.
But also, it's
Because at
Grodin.
first he's just sort of like, I'm telling you, I can't fly.
Right,
I can't fly. And then it's like, these things go down.
These things go down, man. Too heavy.
Go up.
Also, it's Grodin. Like you're like, yeah, that guy kind of plays a neurotic guy.
Yeah.
Like, sure, this guy's neurotic. That's going to be the problem.
Right.
It's that this guy's so goddamn neurotic. And then you realize,
But he's
even
an innocent. You
right,
think.
exactly. And then even when he's like saying like, I really think you ought to go to see your wife and kid in Chicago.
Right.
And there's a part of your brain that's still like, that might be like an honest recommendation from this guy. Like he really does see in Jack the need to sort of finish that up. But of course, there's another part of him that's just my daughter going like, yeah, I'll change my diaper, but like we need to, I kind of need to see what's going on over there, like, and you're like, okay.
But a beautiful part of this movie is, I think, yes, it was a completely strategic move on his part, the daughter push. He's just looking for any way to go off ramp and break Walsh's plan because he thinks that gives him wiggle room. The second he witnesses the interactions with the daughter and the wife is the first time he's like, fuck, now I kind of care for this guy. It's like don't name the animal or else you'll grow attached.
Yeah. Right.
In that moment, he becomes a little too invested into this guy's deal.
Right.
Where then the next time he asks him about what happened with the daughter and the wife, he's actually asking as a human being.
Yes.
He's not trying to trick him.
Their whole relationship just completely flips on its head after that because it's also... Jack sees that the Duke has witnessed this and not said anything.
The most intimate thing imaginable, basically, in Jack's life. Like the thing he wouldn't want anyone to see. He would rather that Charles Grodin look at his butthole than witness 5 minutes of him talking to his daughter.
Of course.
And then as soon as they're out of the house, and we still need to talk about what happens in the house itself.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Right.
they're getting into the station wagon, and he pauses, and he makes sure that the Duke's coat is not caught in the door. And it is such a tender gesture.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, this is an actual relationship now. Everything has changed.
The moment seeing it with a crowd,
Yep. Oh, yeah.
the IFC screening was so like revelatory. There's so many things I didn't notice, but also just fun to watch the way, because this is a movie that like the audience laughs more as it goes on, not because the jokes are getting funnier, but because you're getting to know the characters better, and because the tension is mounting so exquisitely within the plot that then any release is so like welcome. There's the moment that just the audience exploded,
Oh, yeah.
which is another one of those like, oh, quietly, a humongous shift in the character dynamics of this movie when he calls Pantoliano and he says on the phone that he's gonna
If you don't give me my money, I'm just going to shoot the Duke and dump him in the river.
Right.
And then he turns to the Duke and he very broadly like pops his eyes and
just
no,
goes,
no.
no. He does the no sort of
Head
like
shake.
head shake, and it's so subtle,
Yes, but DeNiro
It's in a
is so
two-shot.
fucking funny to do that kind of shit.
so
Yes.
funny. The audience went insane.
Yes.
It felt like the theater was going to collapse.
Yep.
And it's like such a funny moment, but also what's so funny about it is like this guy's decided he gives a shit now,
Right.
that he needs to console him. Like, what is that invisible shift that happened there?
Yes.
Which part of it is they've just started spending too much time together.
Right.
It's impossible. And what you slowly come to realize is like Serrano is the person that ruined Walsh's life. In theory, he should valorize this guy. He should fucking love the Duke.
Right.
As like, you fucked with the guy who fucked with me.
Yeah.
No one's been able to get one up on him.
Right.
This is a feel-good story if I've ever seen one. And instead, because of his job, it's like the only way for me to get out of this whole fucking world forever, maybe, is to deliver this man to his death sentence.
And that's why I think in the first chunk of this movie, especially, he's kind of trying not to get to know him.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a defense mechanism,
Right.
right? Like, so you have the plane fiasco.
Mhm.
Okay. So they can't take a plane. Let's take a train.
Mhm.
So they get on like a cross country train
Mhm.
and they are, you know, that I feel like is where the Duke is really like, you're, you know, trying to hit that home, right?
Right.
Like I'm going to die. Like, you know, I am. Like,
No.
you know, I won't last a minute.
They get the word that Jack and the Duke weren't on the plane when it landed.
Correct. So Dorfler is dispatched.
Right.
by,
And the first thing he does is
Joey Pan.
cancels Walsh's credit card.
Yes. Right.
Yes. Which you could, even in 1988, you could not do with that little information.
That's true. And also it probably happens too quickly, but still, whatever. It's
Yes.
funny. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it helps
and it-
the movie so
Yeah,
much.
it creates so much. We'll talk more about the money in a little bit, but yes, that really helps.
And also DeNiro just really plays well the like, I pay my bills. Like, run it again. Can you run it again? Can you
Right.
run it again?
But
like,
then you get to the moment at the train counter where
Yes.
he's like trying to like finesse his way through the situation, and he realized that he set up conflicting narratives
Yes.
of he's using Mosley's badge.
Right.
But the
Sir,
card
Jack
that's
Walsh
canceled-
is not the name on that ID.
Yeah. Like
so-
he's not airtight.
no. So Dorfler boards the train in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
There is a fight. A humorous fight ensues.
Yes.
I would say that John Ashton fighting anyone in this movie or being physical in any way is hilarious. Would
Yeah.
you agree?
Yes.
Like, just he's a physically hilarious person.
Yeah, and it's so funny to cast him in this right after Beverly Hills Cop, where his bit is to be the ultimate straight man. Like,
Right.
there's the most by the book, button down cop. He's the one who goes like, "Oh, Axel," you know.
Yes, right.
And then in this movie, he's just like trash. He's like
He
fuzzy
is
lumpkins.
The
you know?
scum bum.
He is.
Really.
He is. Talking about this being one of Elfman's best scores, in my opinion. First of all, I think
Obviously, they have a long-running connection. We've discovered this in our Patreon episode
Yes,
to
Hot
discuss
Tomorrows.
Yeah, when I watched Hot Tomorrows, I was kind of freaked out to realize Oingo
Yeah.
Boingo was in it.
Right.
And this is on the earlier end of Elfman's career. I mean, it's like Beetlejuice is the same year.
I was about to look up his
so he's done
filmography.
Pee-wee, he's done Back to School, but this is within his first five.
But
Yeah.
it's such an outlier, not only from what
Yes.
he's done to that point, but basically from everything he's done since then. This sounds nothing
Correct.
like
It
any
is-
other Danny
It is a
Elfman
musical
score.
one-off. It feels a little more indebted to like pop era Oingo Boingo, which I don't love, but I think this is kind of the best version of. But this is also a score that has like 10 good themes in it.
Yeah.
It is a movie that, like, Star Wars is like, this is this character's suite.
Yeah, of course.
This is the music when Darth Vader enters.
Right.
And all the themes are good, but they're unique. And Marvin's theme is so fucking good. It's so funny. Every time the Marvin music kicks in,
Some would argue
it's like bluegrass Seinfeld.
right. Batman is 2 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Which I feel like is his first major, kind of sweeping symphonic
Sure.
thing, right? Yeah. Some would argue that the score of this film is incredibly loud and intrusive to the point of driving you a little crazy. Not me.
It's a lot.
Some people are wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's necessary energy. It's in concert with the film, and it adjusts to the tones of the movie well.
Yes,
Like the
I just had to kind of like acknowledge
Sure.
there's definitely a lot of people who are like, I wish the score wasn't so kind of like, dominant.
But
or
like the
whatever.
aggressive sort of like the theme that gets repurposed as Try to Believe.
Yeah.
A banger song. When you tell people, do you know that Danny Elfman wrote lyrics to the theme and wanted it to be a single and the studio rejected it? You go like, good call on the studio's part. That thing probably sounded like dog shit. And then you listen to it and you're like, it is a fucking banger.
Yes.
It is so goddamn good. It is the one Oingo Boingo song I really like.
Yeah, so there's an Oingo Boingo version, but there is, if you can track down the Out of Print Midnight Run soundtrack, there's the version he did where it's like, Try to Believe by Mosley and the B-Men or something like that. And it's the same performance, but it's got a gospel choir backing him up instead of Oingo Boingo.
Okay. That's
it's
why.
so good. I will send it to you.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's basically the score they play at the end of the movie, but they've lifted the lyrics off from it.
Put some lyrics on it.
What's wild is because that score is such a like Axel F style, we need the fucking jam when our hero is doing his cool shit and hijinks are happening. The slowed down emotional version of it hits so hard. And it should feel like the thing we now all mock in Lego sequel movie trailers, where you do the slowed down dramatic version of the Ghostbusters
right,
theme
the most tiresome, like, you can't just like change the tempo on
right.
this. Like,
And it's,
that's not
but
enough.
it's like he somehow designed a piece that worked in both ways.
Right.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of the next thing after the train.
No, the train, they get off the train.
Yes.
Then you have this running thing where the FBI keeps showing up too late.
Yes.
Which has,
So
again,
that
another
Yaphet
one of the
Kotto
funniest
can
moments in
scowl.
the movie.
Yaphet Kotto's got his one underling who always says the thing
Right.
that
Yes.
Yaphet Kotto has just figured out, and then he just looks back at him silently.
And the train porter says, he's looking for Jack Walsh. He's like, his real name's Mosley.
I'm Mosley.
Yes, and that, again, is one of the big
So
laughs in the
funny.
movie.
a thing I love about Yaphet Kotto in general, but it really sticks out to me here, it feels like his tongue is too big for his mouth. Like when he's talking,
Yes.
he is struggling to get words out.
I was on, in the 90s, this is how long ago it was, I was on a listserv to talk about homicide life on the street.
Yeah.
And at first we called the listserv the box after the interrogation room. And at a certain point, like, there was a split between members of the group because some of them couldn't stand some of the others. So we created a
The 90s internet.
yes, we created a second listserv, and we called this one Fafamem, because there was a line of dialogue that he says on that show that none of us could understand. It's like, did G just say Fafamem?
Yeah.
Because it's just like, yeah.
Of course, he plays Al Giardello, right?
Yes.
That's the character on Homicide, which was not written as a black character.
No, it's a Sicilian
based
guy.
on a Sicilian guy, a real Sicilian guy, right?
Yeah.
And they were just like, yeah, but he's so good.
He's Yaphet Kotto.
right.
Did you guys know, by the way,
Don't
this
even
is,
change the
this is
name.
not the only film where he plays Alonzo Mosley?
What is the other? I do know. Wait, that's something I do know.
Fuck.
What
Okay,
is
there's
it?
a Larry the Cable Guy film called
Right.
Witless Protection.
Well,
And whoever
Good
directed,
movie.
whoever made that
I haven't
was obviously a big fan of Midnight Run. And so Yaphet Kotto is in this as an FBI agent, named Alonzo Mosley. He's dressed like a man in black. He's traveling with other men in black types.
Yeah.
It turns out midway through the movie that he's in fact crooked. So they're spitting in the face of the legacy
Well,
of
I
this
don't
film.
like that. I was into it until that point.
No. But here's the best part. Here's the best
okay.
part. This is a Lionsgate movie.
Yeah.
Nobody thought to get permission to use the character of Alonzo Mosley.
Yeah.
So when they had to release it on home video, he is now called Ricardo Bodie.
yes.
They just dubbed over all of the
Jesus.
dialogue.
Good stuff, right?
I mean,
That's the kind of hilarious situation that Larry the Cable Guy might
See,
be in the middle
so
of.
on the one hand, you have Heart 8, which is also an unofficial sequel.
Yes.
But that's the good version.
Yeah.
And then you have this, which is the bad version.
who was it? I'm sorry for not crediting this properly, but someone on some podcast, I think it might have been on Doughboys. A guest was talking about Larry the Cable Guy health inspector.
Right.
And walking by that poster with their girlfriend. And they didn't know that Larry the Cable Guy was a comedian. They weren't aware of his persona.
Sure.
And they were like, how complicated is the premise of this movie? The setup on the poster is the guy has 2 jobs at once.
Larry the Cable Guy health inspector?
They didn't get that it was like Larry the Cable Guy is.
Well, right. And then when you watch that movie, you're like, oh, this is ironclad.
Right.
Like this thing makes perfect
it's like Midnight Run.
sense. Right. Yes. Obviously, worth noting that Philip Baker Hall in Hard Eight, Paul Thomas Anderson's first film, is sort of playing like a old, washed up, dour version of the guy he's here. You know, it's like, what did that guy 20 years
his name Sidney.
Right.
Yeah,
the movie
10
was
years
originally
later.
titled Sidney, and they made him change the title, but he would rewatch Midnight Run obsessively and go like, what's that guy's fucking story?
Right.
And made his first movie about that.
Right.
I didn't realize that Larry the Cable Guy health inspector fits into this. I was thinking about the like.
No, it's witless
it's
protection.
witless
I'm sorry.
protection, to be clear.
I'm
you
sorry.
are the one bringing the health inspector into this. Right.
Witless protection is.
It's the one where on the poster he has a gun and like a supermodel in his
Ivana
arms.
Milicevic.
Yes. Right,
Okay.
there you go. Culture was doing great then.
Letterboxd list, rep theater screening series, secret sequels,
I hear you.
sequels,
Mhm.
Sydney,
Mhm.
Enemy of the State.
Sure, sort of a conversation sequel, right? Yeah.
I think you'd have to put Split in there.
It's like Enemy of the State is like, instead of the conversation, it's like the screaming, the yelling.
Right.
Instead of we're having a conversation, it's like, ah! Okay, what was this third one?
I think you'd have to put Split, which is a different version.
But it's like the more formalized version.
Yeah,
It's
it's
the
the
same
formalized.
notion
Same
of like,
guy.
FYI, this
Yeah.
was
It's
the
the
same
legally
guy.
cleared version.
Uh-huh.
But I do like this thing when someone casts an actor and is like, we're sort of meta casting them, but also hinting that maybe it's literally the same guy.
But we're not doing like Michael Keaton playing Ray Nicolette in 2 unrelated movies based on Elmore Leonard novels.
almost think
Like that kind of counts, like how Michael
of.
Keaton pops up and out of sight and they're like,
Yeah.
he's playing the same guy that he played in Jackie Brown, which is
Yeah.
the same character.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, Midnight Run. Okay, so what happens next?
Okay,
Alan, you
so
have
all right,
notes.
so they get kicked off. They get off the train because they realize Dorflo's caught them. They go to the bus station.
Yes.
They have trouble getting the bus ticket because
Right. He
at
gets
this
caught
point,
with the badge.
yes.
Yeah.
So they use whatever cash that Jack has. They take a bus to Chicago.
Yeah.
They get to Chicago.
Yes.
The hitman, Mosley and the FBI turn up, but at the same
Right.
time, the hitman
At the
start
bus depot.
shooting at
Yes.
them. They get away. At that point, they go to see Jack's
And
ex-wife.
while they're on the bus is when the Duke is like trying to be like, maybe you should see your wife and daughter.
'Cause-
Like, I
and
really
also
think you should do that.
When the Duke clocks the watch for the first time. That's the
Yes.
first moment
What's
where
the
he
deal with
calls out
this?
the watch.
yes.
Where he says, like, I got people in my life who love me defensively, brings up the wife and daughter, says he hasn't seen them in 9 years. Let's talk about the scene.
Not very. Why you unpopular with Chicago Police Department or the scene with
No, the
White
family.
Family?
That's part of the setup.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
We hadn't said that phrase before, and I felt like
Yes.
it needed to be said. But no, they go to the ex-wife's house. The ex-wife's son with the second husband, the crooked cop, answers the door.
And he's just told us that he hasn't spoken to either of them in 9 years.
Yes.
Yes.
The door opens and she is not an ounce surprised.
yes, it's true.
There's
like,
this sort of knowing look. She
Right.
later says, you guys are all over the news. So she like even recognizes the Duke at this point, but you can tell that she saw this news story and was like, he's going to fucking show up at my door.
Yep.
He's in trouble. He's going to show up at my door.
Yeah. It's not, there is no surprise. There is no disbelief.
No.
And he's trying desperately and she's frustrated with him.
And the way movies like this are set up and our expectations from watching many movies like this, you're waiting for her to chew him out because you assume the thing he hasn't revealed is like, he cheated on her. He was a workaholic. He neglected her. That he fucked up in some way in his interpersonal relationships.
He's such an obvious mess that, right, you're just like, this guy couldn't keep hold of his family for like work reasons.
But she's
Yes.
looking at him with like great sadness.
Right.
Yes.
Right? And almost like a sense of like apology to him.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is the dynamic here?
Because when you find out like what actually happened, you don't necessarily know what he told her.
Yeah.
Like it may just have literally been, Review with Forrest McNeil, where Andy Daly has to divorce his wife without explaining it. It's just sort of like, I need to leave town.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I can't say why. Something bad happened.
But like best case scenario, it was a Fableman style situation
Yeah.
where he was like, I'm going to pretend that I'm a dirtbag and leave
Yeah.
to keep you clean of this. And you're like, and then what does the daughter think?
And then, when they're shouting, they're so upset, and then all of a sudden, everybody stops.
Yeah.
And you turn, and you see his daughter, Denise, and if you see this movie in a theater, you can hear a goddamn pin drop.
Right.
Yeah.
Any setting, any time, because everyone immediately understands, oh, this is what this means. This is how much his life has been ruined.
Right. This is the huge sacrifice or loss or whatever.
And Walls totally cracks. You immediately see an entirely different version of him.
Yeah.
He cannot figure out how old she is. He can't do the math on it.
Again, this gets back to DeNiro repeating things. He says, what grade are you in? She says, 8th. Are you in the 8th grade?
Yes.
Like, he doesn't know what else to even say to her.
No, and he like hugs her for a long time.
Yeah.
But in this way where it feels like he cannot figure out what is the normal way to hug someone.
Yeah.
He keeps readjusting.
Yeah, he
and it's
doesn't
not
seem
just
comfortable hugging a basically grown person.
Right.
Like, his kid's grown up.
He keeps like changing the position of his hands and his neck.
She tries to
And
give him the
apparently there's a
babysitting money.
lot more dialogue in the scene originally. Like,
Sure.
they have a real conversation while the ex-wife's off getting the keys and the money. And I forget whose idea it was. It might have been DeNiro's. It's like, no, cut all of that out.
Yeah.
Like, you
Did
need
they
to see that.
shoot it and cut it out, or did they cut it out on the day when they were running it? Do you know?
I think that they may have shot it and cut it out because they realized, no, like, this is so much more powerful if he's not barely even able to like get 3 words out to her.
It feels like that thing. I mean, I know she did this early in her career, and I think she still does it, but that Celine Sciamma will do, where she'll write very overt dialogue and shoot the full scene and then get into the editing room and be like, well, this doesn't need to be said. That's conveyed in the character's face.
Right.
But having the actors say it in the scene does help the energy, even if you're not going to use those line readings. When she goes to get the money and he's just like, this is insufficient. There is no way to actually catch up with you to the degree I want to in this time.
Right.
There's only so much I can talk to you. There's only so much depth we can get to. And you can see him trying to game out, like, do I apologize to her? Is she just so happy to see me? There's a certain degree to which she's looking at him like a stranger. Like, she knows it's her father, but also hasn't seen him in so long that it must be bizarre for her.
And he can't say anything to explain it, because how could you possibly explain or justify that they haven't even been in touch?
No, and also the man who is raising her now is like a fucking dirty cop, the kind of guy that Jack Walsh torpedoed his life to prevent himself from becoming.
Yes.
Like, he does not want to burden her with that.
Yeah.
Like, explaining why he's not around explains why she has been raised in this, like...
And turns her against her stepfather.
Right. Like, there's this part of him that's just like, it's easier for me to be the bad guy. And then, she chases him out with the fucking babysitting money.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, he rejects it and he does the right thing and all that. Obviously he's never going to take the money.
Yeah.
But it's very emotional.
Although, I've thought about this. If he takes the money, which again, he should not take.
Sure.
There's no version
Obviously
where he
he
should
can
take
pay her back eventually.
Yes.
If, you're thinking
if he takes the money,
right.
There's no shootout in Amarillo because they can drive all the way there. They've got enough gas money. No litmus configuration. No chorizo and eggs.
Yeah.
No being in the
we're
river.
losing some great scenes.
Better for them, worse for us.
He doesn't find out that the Duke is a pilot. None of the rest of the movie happens if he has her babysitting money.
Yeah.
Right. Well, he turns it down. He does the right thing.
No.
Pin the daughter for later conversation. Let's keep going through the plot.
Okay. Yeah. There's another thing about the daughter that I need to bring up later.
Okay.
Well, everyone's got to bring up the daughter later.
I can do it now.
I love how it's like the duality of how the goons keep having to report back that they failed, and then the FBI have to keep reporting back too. They keep kind of like pairing those together.
Yes.
And the goons are such a pair of fucking jamokes.
They
With
really
the ones on the
are.
phone, the other one's fucking like body bagging him.
Hey, look at this. Hopalong Casadich.
Right, and trying out the hat and all this shit. Like, they're just like, this is fun. This is a trip for us.
Yeah, right. They're actually going to go on a field trip. Is basically
and
their
then
vibe.
interspersed with that, you constantly have Marvin winding up in police custody.
Yeah.
Mosley showing up, taking his cigarettes, and leaving. And then eventually, like, you get the sense that cops don't like FBI agents. And so one of them just rats out to Marvin where to go find Mosley next.
But Marvin's just a blunt force instrument. Anytime you cut to Marvin, when you cut back to Walsh, it makes you appreciate Walsh more.
But I was about to say, right, is Marvin, he's not better than Walsh at the job.
He's bad.
He's kind of bad, but he does have, right, like a sort of effectiveness in his own way that you do kind of witness.
His
He
lack...
just doesn't ask a lot of questions or think out like the complex sort of dynamics at play.
Right.
Yeah, and eventually you discover that he knows who the Duke is and has in fact reached out to Serrano's crew.
Right, because early on...
Yeah.
Marscone says it to him, and he's like, I have no idea who the fuck that is. Yeah. Like, you think it's kind of telling of the difference of Jack being, even
Jack's a former cop. He's got more of like a detective.
And he has a history with Serrano, so he would have known about this.
Yes.
Hey, okay.
So then because of that, they make the phone call. You know, I'm in Anchorage, Alaska.
Yes, where he's like, I know you guys are listening.
Yes,
right. I'm wearing a giant carnation.
You know, there's these guys. They're up the street. You know, they stink of BO. They're constipated. Yeah. Okay, all of that. That's great.
Sitting on their
They go
reveals to him that Marvin's also right. Yeah, yes. I mean that he was the one who hired Marvin. Whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
They go to Amarillo. The Duke hears about chorizo and eggs, and for the rest of my life, if I'm in a restaurant that serves chorizo and eggs, I have to order it.
Sounds good. I mean, I love chorizo.
More on number one and more on number two catch up to them. Dorfler interrupts it. Then there's a car chase. A helicopter is chasing them.
Right.
Jack shoots a helicopter out of the sky with a handgun.
Cool.
Yes.
It is cool. But of course, it is this like insanely heightened element in a movie that is largely grounded. This is an action-packed movie.
Yeah.
This movie has lots of like brawling and cop business, gunplay a little bit, but like the helicopter thing is the most 80s thing in this movie.
I will not complain about it at all.
No,
it is the one thing that feels
part of Midnight
like
Run.
A studio requirement for the movie.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Right.
The studio's like, come on. Like,
you got to do the formula.
Right.
Yeah. And you put the helicopter chase into the trailer. Like, that's the moment that I think everybody remembers is you guys are the dumbest bounty hunters I've ever seen.
Right. And Danny Elfman's also like, I just took the biggest breath in the world. I need to play this sax for 5 minutes. So can there be a long helicopter chase?
I rewatched Jaws not too long ago, and the bit where Brody, like right after Brody has blown up the shark, he has a very similar reaction to Jack turning back to Marvin after he has shot a helicopter out of the sky.
Pretty cool.
Like, not bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Then
they're in the river in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
It's just so funny.
Yes.
It's so funny that they flew to New Zealand.
To basically drench fucking Robert De Niro.
Because Brest was like, I'm going to do 1 million takes.
Yeah,
if we do this
He'll
anywhere
freeze.
but New Zealand.
Because it's like February. This is the problem. They had to go to the other side, the other hemisphere, where it is warm.
Yes.
But it had to match this verdant, landscape they have or whatever the hell.
Which, by the way, Ben, obviously he's left us now, sadly, Charles Grodin. But just a word of advice to you. They had like interchangeable like dummy handcuffs, plastic handcuffs, and metal handcuffs.
Yeah.
Yes.
And De Niro was like, we should use the metal like in his like sort of
better, right?
Verisimilitude, his methody intensity. That way I can yank on him more and all this sort of stuff. So they almost always use the metal cuffs. And the film shot for so much longer than they thought. And Charles Grodin had permanent scars on his wrists until the day he died.
Yeah, these things really hurt your wrists.
Yeah, they're not like, like humane items. You know what I mean? Handcuffs.
Yeah, they have a real purpose.
There's a reason when like people do sexy handcuffs. It's not. They don't put the little fur on it because they think it looks hot.
Yeah.
It's because it hurts their wrists.
Yeah.
I mean, what does cease and desist really mean, you know?
I am with you.
I just think the Friendlies Corporation is being very harsh to you, Ben, and I don't appreciate it.
I totally
The company
agree.
should be called Harshes if that's how it wants to
They're not
behave.
being very friendly to me.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
If they were like, we're Harshes. Like, you should have seen this coming.
Yeah.
There is a spectrum to harassment. One man's joke is apparently another family chain restaurant's harassment.
Did you
Do you
write
think you
this
can
out or
get-
is this off the dome? It
you
looked
think-
like you were consulting
It
a
did look-
script. It's off. Ben's
you think
pointing at his noggin.
You can get chorizo and eggs at Friendly's. Let's find out.
This is incredible.
Honestly,
stuff.
friendlies, grow up.
All right. Well,
But Griff, does your lawyer strictly deal with entertainment affairs or
Yes.
damn it? Okay.
Okay, so where were we, Alan?
Okay,
Alan, you're actually doing a great job keeping the plot on track here.
Yes, I'm a professional.
Helicopter, right? We
Yes,
did all
they're
that.
in the river. Jack saves the Duke, but then he's going to drown. The Duke saves him, makes Jack promise to let him go.
Right.
Jack then puts the handcuffs right back on, and as soon as he's back out, they wind up at the Indian reservation. You find out that the Duke is a pilot. Jack climbs aboard, the plane, knocks the Duke out.
This is the kind of fun action sequence where I'm like, this really does actually track within the movie.
Totally.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, like him dangling. It's very comical. It's very silly.
Yes. They then steal some of the locals' truck. They give them, the Duke's Rolex.
Mm-hmm.
At that point,
the coffee tea conversation is at the restaurant before he sneaks out for the plane, right? Yeah.
No, it's before the helicopter shows up. It's they're waiting for the Western Union office to open up, and then they get intercepted along the way by moron number 1 and moron number 2.
But that's another quiet moment of kindness between them. Is he's asking for the chorizo and eggs?
Yeah.
DeNiro just shuts it down before he even asks. It's just like, we're not ordering that coffee tea, right?
Yeah.
And then he looks at Grodin being really dejected.
Yes.
And he goes like, look, if I get you to LA, I get you whatever you want. I'll get you one nice meal if we get to the other end of this.
Right. Yes.
And Grodin, like a little child, is like, I just want chorizo and eggs.
Yes.
It's like he's got the one idea in his head now. What do you want? Chorizo and eggs.
Friendly's does not appear to sell chorizo.
Wow.
Sounds about right.
Another mark against them.
They're driving away from the Indian reservation, and then it's another one of the great conversations in the movie where, Jack is so upset that the Duke has been lying to him, and the Duke's like, you lied to me first.
This conversation makes me laugh so hard.
So hard.
Because, the Duke is wrong.
Right.
He is absolutely the first person to lie.
And DeNiro in response says, what? And he says it so big that the mic pops. Did you hear that?
I did.
It blows out. Clearly his reaction was bigger on that one take than the sound guys had anticipated, but the take is so funny they use it.
I guess it's what Jack pretending to be an FBI agent. Is that supposed to be the original lie?
No. The original lie is that Jack, at the time he promises to let the Duke go,
it's all the river thing that just happened.
Right.
Yes,
right,
doesn't know that the Duke has already lied to him about being afraid to fly.
He said, you promised me that if I saved you from the river, you would let me go, and then you didn't.
So as far as
and
you
he's
knew,
like,
you lied to me first.
Right.
And Jack's like, I can't even argue with you. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Funny. This is what it's just. He's so. Speaking to the Casablanca thing, I forgot. The tagline for this movie was literally, "This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship," which is obviously a direct Casablanca.
That's one.
Reference.
There's also one. It's the FBI wants him.
Well, no, both posters have the two taglines.
Oh, okay,
right.
Great posters for this movie.
The tagline I just said is on both, and then they also have the long preamble of Charles Grodin embezzled $15 million. The mob wants him dead. The FBI wants him dead. Robert De Niro just wants him to shut up.
Right. Yep. And the poster, it's a painting of De Niro, they're handcuffed together, and he's putting his hand over Grodin's mouth.
Right. And then the one where Alan has, the other one is the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which I can't even read it all out.
Monday, escape with their lives from New York. Tuesday, impersonate FBI agents in Chicago. Wednesday, steal plane in New Mexico. Thursday, almost kill each other by accident. Friday, almost kill each other on purpose.
This is important. This came up when my daughter and I were driving in here to do this. Mm-hmm. She pointed out, Jack doesn't really just exists in the movie on coffee and cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, it's 5 days. Mm-hmm. The only thing we see him eat at any point is the fried chicken on the train.
Yeah.
He guzzles a little bit of milk after the litmus configuration scene, which I guess we're going to talk about. Is the fried chicken the only thing that Jack eats for 5 days?
And Grodin gives him such a hard time about it. It does feel like it gets in his head where he's like, how can you eat like that? Don't you know about cholesterol? Why do you do things that are bad for you?
Grodin's so fucking annoying.
So annoying.
It's a weapon, though.
Of course he's deploying it, and you don't even realize.
But I feel like if you were to make this movie today, it would be like Ryan Reynolds or Kevin Hart, as the Duke, and they would just be annoying. It wouldn't they would not actually be able to take control in the scene.
With all due respect to the late great Robin Williams, I think the same thing would have happened with him, right? This guy can be annoying if he's also sort of deadpan and laconic in energy. If the guy's manic, it's going to be unbearable. The thing that's interesting about the Cher idea to me is, even though this is obviously the best casting in both parts you ever could have had, Cher could have been good as Jack Walsh.
Cher would be good
That's
in either of these
more
things.
her
Cher's always
energy,
good.
though.
I think she could. I mean, if you
She
watch her
could
in
do both.
Moonstruck, she's kind of deadpan and frustrated.
100%.
High Yellow
But
and
that's
Cage.
right. The way she reacts to Cage in Moonstruck is the way that De Niro reacts to Grodin in this. Like,
Cher
the
and
fuck are you
Cage.
talking about?
Cher and Cage just doing this movie?
Ooh.
I mean,
Reunite them?
Kind of could work.
It's around here that Dorfler takes the Duke,
Yeah.
right? In Arizona.
You've got a ways to go. I mean,
Do I?
I don't.
What else is left?
Do you want me to go
Oh,
beat
there's
by
the
beat?
train.
We're still on
Okay.
Wednesday or Thursday?
No. So all right. They've now stolen the Indian reservation truck. They've had the "you lied to me" first argument. Jack's ulcer is acting up, and
Right.
at that point, it's
Needs milk.
yeah. The Duke's like
You gotta
they don't
cook
have any
that.
money. Give me the FBI badge. I'm going to get you some money for that shit you eat.
And he uncuffs him and trusts him.
Yes.
That's the final step is like, obviously, if I'm going to do this, you need to uncuff me.
And they go into Red's Corner Bar, and he poses as Alonzo Mosley, and he's looking for counterfeit bills, and it's just this improv tour de force by
Yes.
Grodin.
Yes. That is very funny.
And as you said, like, De Niro can barely like stay in character at
right.
this point.
Dark hair, light hair.
Yeah.
Sounds like our guy. But everything is he takes an extra 10 seconds to respond.
That
than
is
you
his
expect.
magic trick. And
Yes.
guess what? It'll always
It'll
make
work
me laugh.
every time.
Yeah.
Why
That-
they call you Red.
Yeah. They take the stolen money, they buy food at the convenience store, they then
Sure.
jump on the freight train.
Oh, the freight train, right.
Yeah,
of course.
Jack
Right.
loses his food, so again, he doesn't eat.
Right.
Then they have the exchange that I used to quote all the time at the end of my old podcast, which people thought was a lost quote, but it's from Midnight Run. See you in the next life, Jack.
Yeah.
And then Jack climbs over the train. It's like, glad to see me. I guess we're in the next life, John.
But this
People
is,
thought it was to John Locke.
well,
that was the quote?
No, see you in the next life, Jack. They thought that was Desmond.
Oh, okay.
Desmond's
Okay.
always saying, "See
Yep.
you in another
Yep.
life, brother."
Yes.
I'm familiar.
Okay. That's cool.
It's Jack and John. The show had a Jack and a John.
Yes.
true.
I thought it was an exchange between the two of them. But yeah, in the boxcar, you get the sex with animals thing.
Yes,
and you,
they're really like thawing at this point.
you get the
yes.
watch.
And he finally explains the watch. It's always set half an hour ahead. His wife gave it to him because he's always late. It's almost like we need to watch like this.
Yeah. And the Duke and the Duke finds out that the heroin
You didn't see
dealer.
that coming? Come on.
Do you know what the irony of this is? I don't know if I've ever said this.
Oh boy.
Growing up, every clock in my house was set fast
Okay.
because my dad was like, well, your mother has no sense of time.
Uh-huh.
So we need to fake what time it is
Right.
to correct her.
Okay, so you would be like, it's 11 o'clock, we got to go, but actually it would be 10:30 or whatever.
So then over time, I'm like, oh, the time is wrong. And I think it has fucked up my relationship with time forever, where I just grew up in a house where I'm like, well, none of these numbers mean anything.
This is like key blank check mythology I'm
Yeah.
learning about here. Like, this is why you're always late.
Ben and I are just looking at each other right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sort of
Doesn't it make a-
perplexed.
Can you
Doesn't
put
it
those
make a-
cuffs on him, though, maybe, for now?
Does that
I
not make
would
a lot
love
of
to.
sense
All right.
as like a fucking...
It makes as much sense as anything else, I guess. Your brain was just programmed to disbelieve time.
These clocks are all lying to me.
The other thing that happens on the train is that the Duke finds out that the heroin dealer Jack has told him about was Serrano. He
Yes.
confronts him like, this is even more of a betrayal now.
Right.
You're not just sending me to die, you're sending me to be killed
Right.
by your mortal enemy.
Right.
You're doing his job for him. I can't believe you, Jack.
All the other Chicago cops were dirty. Jack refused to
Yes.
take the money.
Yes.
They ran him out of town. They dirtied his name. He took the fall.
Yes.
Well, yeah, they like planted heroin in his house or whatever, and
Yeah.
we're gonna like bust him or whatever.
And now his wife is
married
with
to one of the
one of the guys who's
crooked
been,
cops.
Right.
He's now he's made captain.
Yes.
But it's like the
You
classic.
hear they
like,
made this guy a fucking
he's on the
captain.
take. He takes the money just like
Yeah.
everyone else, and
Yeah.
thus, right, he is, protected, quote unquote, and he's rising through the ranks.
But it's so key to Jack's
of course,
personality.
this is total fiction. Nothing like that ever happens.
Right.
In real life.
This guy sort of has this very like Boy Scouty notion of like the idea of upholding the law, but now distrusts all actual government agencies because he's like, well, they're all crooked.
Okay, so
They jump off the train.
yes, off the train.
They're in Flagstaff or somewhere in
Sedona,
Arizona.
Sedona,
Yeah, they're in Sedona. Jack steals a truck.
Mhm.
Then we have the final like chase of the movie,
Yeah.
the Blues Brothers chase, where there's a million cop cars coming after him.
Right.
There's
okay.
a bit like
Danny
it in-
Elfman takes another.
I mean, when I watched Beverly Hills Cop last night, there's a bit towards the end when all the Beverly Hills police cars are crashing into each other, coming into Maitland's house. That's like the sort of the the beta test version of what he does here.
Absolutely.
But this is where Dorfler gets.
Yes, because he happens to just like literally be going down the road where Jack
drives into them. Yes.
Am I lucky or am I good? I'm the fucking I'm the best.
And you have this additional tension from the fact where you're just like, Dorfler's just kind of like 20% too dumb to totally understand the movie he's in.
But then something like Dorfler, like Grodin, the Duke being like trying the plane thing on him again. And Dorfler's like, fine, my answer to that is to punch you in the face.
Right.
You're like, right, Jax maybe should have just thought of that. Right. Like too stupid for Jack to actually just be like, dunk, like that's how you deal with that
greatest
problem.
Asset is he just like lacks humanity. Like it's impossible to get him to warm up to you.
Right.
So he won't fall
He's
for your
too
tricks.
thick. Yes.
Right, but he also like can't game shit out.
He's also good at swinging a car door open.
But like when Moscone calls Marvin, he's got a prisoner cuffed in the bathroom, and he is just completely like not treating this guy like a human being.
Right.
And then you compare it to the Duke being able to talk his way out of the bathroom on the train.
Yes.
Because Jack still, on some level, despite being cynical, despite not caring about anybody else or pretending to, is still a human being.
No, when he ends up with Marvin, you almost read on him for a second that he's excited, where he's like, this guy might be easier. This might be my lucky break. By the time you get to the hotel room or the motel room, he's like, I miss Jack. He's not saying it, but it's all over his face.
Right.
Of like, I didn't know how good I had it. And if I'm gonna die either way, I could spend a couple days with someone I kind of respect.
Right.
Versus this guy's just like a battering ram.
Yeah.
And you get the Tracy Walter scene. And one of the things that I love about the movie is there's all of these like service workers throughout, with a couple of exceptions like the bus station lady. And they're so helpful and so kind. Like Tracy Walter is exactly what Jack Walsh needs in this moment in his life. And the train porter is helpful to everybody. And it's just, there's a lot of that. And the waitress and Amarillo. Yeah. So it's like a love letter to traveling the country and, being in these crazy
That's true. There's a warmth to this movie. It's not about how like, whatever, the middle of America sucks or anything like that. Like there's a lot of charm along the way, even though both main characters basically just want to like go to sleep like the entire time.
The distrust is at the people in extreme positions of power.
Yes.
Yeah.
To the point that like Yaphet Kotto is basically just a good guy in this movie who's trying to arrest a mobster.
Yeah.
But the whole time you're like, fuck this guy. Can you shut up?
Yeah.
But then there's
he's literally just trying to build a case against a man you literally know to be evil.
He ruined your life.
But
and
then
there's like, yoink!
Great turn. There's the great turn once Jack is in FBI custody and he figures out what's going on.
Well, here's what's actually happening. Right.
Yeah, Dorfler is now working with Moron number 1 and Moron number 2. And he calls Eddie, and they've got the Joey Pants profane meltdown to end all Joey Pants profane meltdown on the phone. And he's like, tell Alonzo I want to make a deal. And suddenly he and Alonzo are partners. And it is so delightful.
It feels like The Last Jedi when fucking Kylo and Rey start going at the guards together.
They are powerful together, even
and
though
you're
they're
just
still
sort of
grumpy
like,
at each other.
I never thought this would happen. I never thought they'd be fighting against the same common enemy. How could the setup happen where they want to work together?
There's a callousness, I think, where Mosley is kind of like, if this fails, he is the casualty, not me.
Yes.
Because, Walsh is the one who has to basically like bump into Serrano and convince
also,
him to say a thing.
He's so irritated with Walsh that at least he would get some perverse pleasure from watching Walsh go to jail as punishment for...
But nonetheless, they are allies.
But the thing is, when you see them on the plane and Jack is running through how it's all going to work, Mosley is getting like happier and happier. And this is not a human being you're accustomed to being in a good mood at all. Like... He's like, oh my God, like I love this fucking guy now.
This is a good fucking plan.
He's the worst person I've ever met, and now he's my favorite human being alive.
It has to be the first time he smiles in the entire movie.
Yes, he smiles then, and then when he busts Serrano, the smile on Yaphet Kotto like could light up Arizona.
It's beautiful.
He's got a great smile.
But you have the sunglasses has been seated throughout the entire movie. The one pair of sunglasses that are changing hands back and forth between the two guys, where then you have that simplicity, the cleanness of the sunglasses on the diner counter.
Yes.
And knowing like, great, we don't even need dialogue here. We can cut straight to the precinct.
Yep.
Finale is
McCarran Airport. Genuinely tense, but also funny. Again, the magic trick of the movie is it's both.
And just this very
now
clean
called
setup.
Harry Reid Airport.
It's the tapes now.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got the tapes. If we could get them.
Discs.
The discs.
Serrano's got the discs.
Serrano's got the discs.
It's these fake, it's like, oh, the Duke has discs that'll put you away.
Yes.
He just has to convince him to essentially want this fake evidence.
Obstruction of
whatever.
Obstruction of justice, interstate,
exactly.
like transport.
Right. He says you could bust him on this and this, and Carter's like, okay, well, let's see if it happens.
But it becomes such a tiny little act of, if you can, in a public space, get Serrano to personally hand you these discs with the verbal understanding that they will be destroyed, we have him. And that's all you got to do, is get him physically there to shake your hand and say that.
And it's Dorfler who breaks the wire by bumping into Jack.
Yes.
So Jack has to literally just yell like he's got the discs.
Yes.
Right. Like that's the fun, tense chaos of the final moments.
Because Serrano's guys are poached out. Mosley's guys are poached out. Marvin doesn't get it.
But even before that, you've got like the conversation between Jack and Serrano, where it's like Serrano is riding so high on the hog, and
he loves that this guy is like broken.
Look at what I have made you into, and now I'm going to just enjoy this. And Jack's got to stand there and eat it, even though he knows ultimately, like, I've got this plan to get him, because it still hurts.
As you said, and I agree with you, David, at this point, he's got the midnight run tan. He looks so fucking cool with the dust and the dirt.
The makeup is actually really well done, because the way it builds is sort of slow. And then by the end, you're like, well, I know why he looks like that. Yeah.
But if you're Serrano and you come in like a fucking silver suit and you look like $1 trillion, and then this guy rolls in and like looking like fucking Pigpen, you're like...
Still hot, though.
Yeah, but within the world of the movie.
I know.
Yes. It's a beautiful, like, non-action setup to an action movie finale that couldn't be more exciting, and is just like, how many game pieces are now on the board? Every thread's
things crashing into each other. They crash into each other with perfect amount of chaos.
Correct.
The thing about the thing we already discussed, the end of the film, where Walsh, of course, realizes I can't bring this guy in.
Yeah.
Is it does feel almost symbolic at this point. As you've said, the Duke is no longer probably in trouble, even if he gets brought in, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be targeted by the mob anymore, right?
Because they have bigger charges against him now.
Yeah, it would be too dangerous, right? All this, right? Like, but it's still just the principle of, like, even though they've sorted all this out, he still can't put him in jail.
It's enemy of my enemy is my friend shit. Right. Like, you shouldn't go to jail. I agree with you.
Right. And also, we've been through so much together, and you saved my life.
Yeah.
And you witnessed like the lowest moment of my entire life. Yeah. And you didn't say anything. And it's all these things.
Yeah.
It
is real, like, Duke rock. Yeah.
I get the sense
People
in this
would
movie.
rather do a midnight run than go to therapy.
True.
Blah, blah, blah. Right. Yeah.
But also, like, 9 years since he left his wife and his daughter, right? I do not think he has spent this much concentrated time with anyone since then.
Right.
No.
Right.
That's the sense I get. He's usually doing, like, bounty jobs.
Do you think he has, like, a really clean and put together apartment?
Absolutely.
Jack Walsh.
Yeah.
He's got like an Eames chair.
It's important, of course, that this emotional decision is made before the then, like, crucial exchange of gifts.
Yes.
Watch to Mardukas, belt with $300,000 in it to Jack.
He there's the great, like, sort of, look at that. We get on the plane. They're on the plane. Duke is just sort of sitting there in silence with this energy of, like, I'm walking to my death. I can't believe he's actually bringing me in, but also I kind of get it, right? There's just no words exchanged. They get off the plane. He picks up the phone, yells at Pantaleano. He's like, you hear him say hello, say goodbye, because I'm not fucking turning him in.
Right.
And, like,
I love how the other guy's gotten arrested already.
Yeah.
And he's so defeated.
Right.
Yeah.
And Grodin is just, like, beside himself. And then the added element of kindness of giving him the watch.
Well, and the kindness, and also, like, the healthiness of, like, okay, I'm letting it go.
Right.
Like,
and DeNiro, like, in DeNiro's mind, he's like, I'm in a movie. This is the perfect ending. I walk away. I give him the watch. How could it get better than that? And Grodin, you almost sense he lets him walk far enough away.
Right. He's like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not, he's hiding behind the fucking phone booth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's so quietly going, like, come here. Come over here. Come over here. Like, he's so subtle about it. He brings him in so close. He takes off the belt where he's had all this money strapped to his person.
Alan, you've thought about this.
Yes.
What's he going to do with all these $1,000 bills, which is basically like Monopoly, like fake money?
This is the beauty of the final line of the movie.
Go ahead. Of course, can you break 1,000? Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
what are you, a comedian? Get out of here, you bum.
yeah.
And that's George Gallo, by the
Yes.
way. Yes.
And Martin Brest, we should mention, is the airline counter guy who sells Marvin the ticket, smoking or non-smoking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take a wild guess. Yes.
No, I think what I love about it is you're like, what a beautiful fairy tale ending. And then he walks out and it's like, this guy can't spend the
Does
money.
he even have a bank account to put this in?
He doesn't know.
It's going in a shoebox under his bed, obviously.
Like, what the fuck do you do where you go to the bank and you're like, I'd like to deposit $300,000 in cash? Like, the bank isn't just
I bet
like,
Western
cool.
Union could help him out.
No, and the kinds of people who could help him with the money are the exact people he doesn't want to be in league with.
It's the right amount of success for him.
He could find a Jimmy McGill who
might
would set him
figure
up
it
with
out.
a restaurant, but
He
he doesn't
probably
want to
will.
work with a Jimmy McGill.
Yeah, he might. He's going to walk down the road for a little bit.
On the other hand,
So
if he was to
consider
meet
his
Mike
options.
Ehrmantraut, I think they would get along.
They would. They're similar.
And Mike could hook him up with some money laundering, through the Fring organization.
As long as you don't talk to my granddaughter. Just stealing Comedy Bang Bang. That's
An incredibly funny bit. It is a perfect ending. I don't know how long it took George Gallo in that hotel room of his to come up with it, but he did a great job.
But that final conversation, I'm sitting there watching it on my fucking 10-inch childhood bedroom TV, and I'm getting choked up. And I'm like, God, I'm invested in what these two guys mean to each other.
Yep.
And the two of them play that scene so beautifully. How much money is it, and what's the final amount?
It's 300,000. It's in the neighborhood of 300,000.
And then DeNiro goes, it's a pretty good neighbor.
Yeah.
He does full DeNiro the way you would parody him. This guy, it's a pretty good neighbor.
But he's so pleased with himself when he gets a joke off. That's another thing I love in this performance.
Yes.
Right. He's not a comedian per se. He's right.
It's like Pauly
he
Walnuts.
appreciates a good
Anytime
joke.
he gets a good joke off, he
tone?
wants to make the world know.
Yes.
Hear that tone?
Hear that tone. Yeah. And then he is like, God, what a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Here I go. He starts to walk away. He looks back. Duke's already gone.
Yeah. Where's he going? Where's
He's never
Duke
going to see him again. There's the moment, because they have the line of in a different life, we probably still would have hated each other. You think the movie's going for the corny thing. And it's like, no, actually, if they had met in different circumstances, they probably would have turned each other off immediately.
Yeah.
Only in these circumstances would they have spent this much time together and grown a begrudging appreciation. And you get the sense, for me at least, my read has always been that when DeNiro looks back at him, it's almost like he's realizing, we should stay in touch. Maybe you should be my friend. Maybe we have built something here. And he's gone, and he just goes I guess that was what it was. Walks out, tries to get a cab. They won't break his money. And he just fucking zips his jacket up, goes,
roll the credits,
guess
man.
I'm walking.
While he walks.
But there's the one good moment right before that when he turns to the sky cap and he asks him for the time.
Yes.
And he's like, I would have made it. To
I
him,
would've
that's
made
what
it.
matters is,
I would have made it.
Right,
He's
he's
gotta
still a
get it done.
professional.
But he only clocks that when everything else is settled.
Yes.
That's what I mean, right? You have to have the emotional conclusion before you have the practical conclusion.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's fine.
And then fucking Danny Elfman wails out, try to believe.
Is there anything? And we're not done, obviously. We'll do the box office game. We'll talk about the
we got another hour
wonderful
left in
sequels.
the
That's
episode.
not true.
How have we
but,
gotten this far, David, without discussing the smoking?
I don't know. Please go ahead and discuss the smoking of Midnight Run. These cigarettes.
Well, Ben, if I can share a confidence,
Yes, you
please tell me what happened when you and I were talking off mic before this began.
I mean, this movie, as a former smoker,
yes,
is really,
Trigger.
really hard to watch.
it makes it look like sucking on a butt is real good.
It's not just that it makes it look damn good. It's that he's doing it pretty much at every new setting that he's in. It's constant.
Yep.
It somehow looks. I don't approve of smoking, and I don't think people should do it.
Yeah.
Looks like it's what's made him handsome and cool. I hate to say,
David, I agree with you.
it's like the more he takes in the smoke from the cigarette, the hotter and cooler he gets.
Every time I watch this movie,
Obviously, there's plenty of movies where that's the vibe, but this is kind of the epitome.
I watch this movie and I consider buying a pack.
Just a pack of heaters.
It's working for him so hard.
But Marvin's smoking constantly, Mosley's smoking constantly.
Yeah.
So, does that work as any kind of
No,
counterbalance?
I don't want to be Marvin.
The thing is, it's like you buying the jacket or whatever. You're not going to look any cool. You're not going to enjoy it or look cool. It doesn't, it's all movie magic.
Yeah.
But he looks fucking great. Yes.
But it's just it's the most smoking like I had ever seen to that point in a movie. It's very constant.
It's a very grown-up movie. Now, these are all both kind of juvenile men, actually, if you sit down and think about it. But these like smoker, diner-eating, coffee-drinking dudes, especially when, you're a teenager, you're like, these are like grown-up guys.
It's an R-rated movie almost exclusively for its use of the word fuck.
There's no real violence in it apart from a lot of wrestling.
No.
Well, I mean, a lot of guys getting punched in the face, but like no one.
This is not R-rated stuff.
I think the only people who die are the anonymous hitmen on the helicopter.
They do die,
right?
And they're also smoking everywhere.
Yes,
planes, trains.
You used to be able to smoke on the cigarette on the
Yes.
plane. I don't know if you know this.
I do know this, and I find it insane.
Yep.
Yeah,
like
it's like you
like I have my baby. And I'm smoking next to it.
No, Ben, there were smoking sections
at the back
and
of the plane.
non-smoking sections. And of course, there was no way that in a tight cylinder, the air from the cigarette smoke could make its way to the rest of the plane.
My dad on a plane, because by the time I was a kid, smoking was banned on planes. It was the most insane shit in the world. Like the fact that he had to go 7 hours without a cigarette was like he would like eat like gum by the like snowball. He would like, be mashing the gum together.
Big League Chew?
Sure. Yeah.
I had a very fond memory of watching Danny DeVito on the Rosie O'Donnell show.
Sure.
Talking about, I guess shortly after the transition had happened, the rules had changed. Smoking was disallowed.
Like sort of mid-90s, I feel like is when that finally is done.
And he was a big cigar aficionado, and he took out a cigar and was trying to light it, and the flight attendant comes up and goes, "Excuse me, Mr. DeVito, this is no longer allowed on the plane." And he's just like, I really want to smoke this thing or whatever. And at some point he pitches to her, if I go down the plane and I ask every single passenger individually.
Oh, like, can I smoke? Is it okay?
Yeah,
right.
if everyone says okay, and if a single person says no, then I won't do it. It's like, sure. And he went down the aisle and was Danny DeVito, like, charmed the socks off of them, like, used his movie star wattage and his fame, took pictures, fucking whatever. He gets to the last row and there's a gruff guy sitting there and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, cigar." And the guy goes, "On one condition, that you got one for me as well." And DeVito and this stranger smoked on the plane, big fucking Havanas or whatever.
Crazy, because cigars are so stinky.
They do be smelling bad.
They're friggin' chimneys of tobacco.
My memory of DeVito delivering that line in the Rosie O'Donnell show was equivalent to the actor Elizondo running.
Or De Niro shaking his head.
Cut to the audience, koosh balls flying everywhere.
DeVito tells a good story.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy
Jersey's
can spin a yarn.
Elmo's being tickled.
This film, Elmo's being tickled. It was the 90s.
They were tickling Elmo's.
I got a couple more things.
Please.
Okay. One of them is I've written about this movie so much over the years.
You can read Alan's writing on it, obviously.
Yes, including
places.
at rollingstone.com. When I think I wrote about like the 15th anniversary, I don't remember now.
Sure.
I got an email from someone who was in active development on a sequel, and he sent me that draft of the script. And this is the one where the Duke's son is in trouble and Walsh has to come save him.
Right.
2010, they announced
it was
this.
sort of the, like, Brett Ratner, I think, was attached.
At one point, it seemed to be developed as...
Like, it was going to be older De Niro and a new younger foil.
Like Jonah Hill.
Right. Yeah.
Something like that.
Was it called
Sounds good.
Jog?
It was called, I believe it was going to be called Another Midnight Run, even though they used that title for one of the Christopher McDonald movies.
Which we also have to talk about.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll talk about all of this.
Briefly.
We have another hour.
No, we don't.
Yep, we do.
Nope.
I believe the intention was Jay Baruchel.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And he was going to play the Duke's son.
Yeah.
And Grodin, because Grodin,
I mean, he has the energy.
Grodin at that point didn't want to like work outside of, like he lived in Connecticut, so he wouldn't work any further than New York City.
Grodin did 10 years with no on-camera appearance, and then quietly started stepping back in, but would do small stuff, and did like Louis, did While We're Young, did that weird movie, The X.
Yep, the Zach Braff
wasn't doing a lot. Famously turned down, like they wrote a thing for him to be in the later Muppet movies, reprising his role from Great Muppet Caper, and they were like, he's like, I don't want to get on a plane. These things go down.
They're too big.
But yes, he was going to play some small part. It was mostly going to be the Duke's son, and apparently was being pushed forward by De Niro being like, I love Midnight Run.
Right.
That's the character I've always wanted to play again. I'm probably at the final window of me being a non-depressing age to be Jack Walsh.
Thank God this never happened.
Agreed.
I assume the script you were handed was mediocre.
Honestly, I'm not sure I finished it. Not necessarily because it was terrible, but just, at a certain point I got distracted and I was not excited enough to go back. But the thing I remember is Jack is still running the coffee shop. It's not going well, and so he's taking like skip tracing jobs
This
to
is
help
why I don't like sequels.
keep
but
the
yes,
coffee shop going.
Right.
And Denise is like in LA helping him run the coffee shop. So they have at least somehow
They've
repaired
reconciled. Sure.
their
I mean, that's
relationship.
fine. Yeah.
Yes, that's the main detail from it.
But that's a problem with any sequel, especially long-running sequels. It has to be like, how do we get him back to the status quo? It's like, no, I like imagining all possibilities from a movie like this. I don't want to think about what Jack's actually doing.
Well, I'm going to build up to my pitch in a second. But then 2 years ago, they announced that a new version was being developed with Regina Hall.
Yes, with DeNiro just producing or something. But
Yes.
that was announced 2021.
Okay, 3 years ago.
So
Yeah.
my guess is it has not really moved forward.
I will say Regina Hall in like Support the Girls specifically.
I
you could
love Regina
see
Hall.
That energy translating over to Jack Walsh or Jack Walsh
You
type
can't
character.
make this movie again.
Like, you can make a movie like it. Don't call it
100%.
Midnight Run.
Exactly. This is a formula movie. You can make a formula movie.
Can I give you the one sequel pitch that I think would work? And I think I've said this to you, Alan.
Okay, please.
I think the one movie you could make, and you probably have a 5-year window before you can't make this again, is to do the movie about his daughter. And I'm not saying in the like a sequel sense. I think that scene is so affecting. And I think there is something to setting up that character decades later where it's just like she went into a similar field to try to understand the father who abandoned her.
Right. But even then.
And you make him, to some degree, the figure that she needs to hunt down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the status quo, like the way you don't make it, you're stripping him back down to the status quo is just like what we were just saying. This guy's not going to know how to fucking set up the restaurant.
Right.
I don't want the movie where he's like, I started the restaurant, it went under, or I do this on the side, you know? But a movie where this guy was like, I left behind bounty hunting, but I also wasn't going to go back to being a cop again. I had this money, didn't know what to do with my fucking self. And through some set of circumstances, he and the daughter reunite. I'm like, that's the only angle to a sequel that I think could work.
Yeah.
And enough time has passed that the daughter could be played by a female movie star of the right age.
Yes.
That's my take.
Fine.
But also,
I'm
this movie
just kind
never
of like,
needs a
right, don't
sequel.
touch it.
Now, Christopher McDonald
Hands
had
off.
something
Except for, of
else to say.
course, another Midnight Run Around, and Midnight Run for Your Life.
Yes.
The 3 television films starring the great Christopher McDonald.
Of course.
A man I have no beef with.
We love.
Who looks really fucking good in the leather jacket.
He does look good.
I mean, I've not seen these films. I assume you have.
I
Alan.
saw at least the first one, which is the one with Jeffrey Tambor and Kathy Moriarty.
Right,
as like,
which sounds like a pretty good time.
yes.
Right?
And then I'm not sure I watched the other ones. It's also funny to have Dan Hedaya as Eddie because, like, those are two very interchangeable guys in the 80s.
This is Shooter McGavin we're speaking of, Ben.
Shooter McGavin
For
from Happy
perspective.
Gilmore,
Yeah.
Lyle Manley from The Iron Giant, a
Incredible.
buttoned-up waspy villain
Right.
from 1 Billion Movies. He's in Hacks these days.
But
Yes.
a very different
Great actor.
energy from De Niro. And this is part of a thing that I believe is called the Universal Action Pack.
The Action Pack. There was
Right.
that.
The
There-
Darkman sequels come out of that?
I think so. There was Vanishing Sun, which was a martial arts show.
Yes.
There was Bandit.
Yes.
It's a Smokey and the Bandit spinoff where it's just like a hot young guy driving a Trans Am,
Right.
who did not have a mustache, so I'm not even sure what the point of it was.
They basically made a bunch of short made-for-TV action movies, and they'd make several sequels at a time to properties that Universal had that would then air into, like, syndication.
It was a wheel, like the thing where Columbo was
Yes.
airing along with McMillan and Wife and McLeod and all these
Right.
other things.
So
Right.
it's like there are 3 Midnight Run sequels made by TV people that feel like they're halfway between being actual movies and being a small amount of episodes of a Midnight Run TV show that never happened.
Weird.
Yeah,
Blech.
but they're
Very
called
weird.
Another Midnight
It's
Run and
from
Midnight Run Around.
It's from a bygone era where
Yeah.
you would do that. Like, let's make the TV version of this. No one's going to care.
Right.
Like, it won't hurt the movie because, like, it's just airs on TV and then everyone forgets about it. Right?
and it's not on network
Yeah.
at a time
Right.
when that mattered.
Right.
No.
You'd see it on like a Saturday afternoon.
And for all those guys, like as you said, a lot of those actors were very established at the time. I was like, easy paycheck. Who fucking gives a shit?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll do Midnight Run Around. But yeah, I think it does speak to how quickly this movie, much like Darkman, like did pretty well in theaters and then probably exploded within 2 years. They were like, wow, this is outselling most of our bigger films at Blockbuster.
Right.
Yeah.
The ratings for this on cable continue to be really strong.
I do want to, yes, this movie only made about 38 domestically, like another 43 internationally. And that's nothing compared to Beverly Hills Cop.
Right.
But it was a solid hit.
Yeah.
It was actually a really big deal for DeNiro, who is, for all his esteem, never seen as a box office draw. No. This kind of helps him in that regard.
And it defines his movie star persona. It changes the next 20 years of his career.
And it did get great reviews.
Yeah.
But like what we were saying before, everyone's like, this is a really great example of like a fun Hollywood
top shelf
movie.
entertainment.
Exactly. Yes.
It was not canonized as deeply upon release as it would very quickly.
Like you guys talk about all the time, we didn't know how good we had it.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a fascinating case. I feel like we've talked about before, David, the case of like people making the follow-up to a Best Picture winner that at the time is seen as a bit of a disappointment. And then with distance, everyone's like, that was the good one.
Right.
The sort of like talented Mr. Ripley effect.
Yes.
Right? No disrespect to English Patient, but you're like, that's his most beloved movie now.
These days it is, yes.
Right. And at the time, people were like, Minghella couldn't quite recreate
it.
Too
dark.
Right. And on a sort of action comedy level.
Why isn't it about like an English patient of some sort? I really like that element of his prior film.
But on an action comedy level, this movie has that exact relationship to Beverly Hills Cop, where they're selling it as like, finally,
from
the
new
movie from the director of Beverly Hills Cop.
It's been 4 years.
And people are like, good. And it does well.
Yes.
And then now, 25 years later, everyone's like, that's a masterpiece. That's the movie that everyone studies.
It's a definitive 80s Hollywood movie, especially, I feel like.
Yes.
Like when you're considering that era of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
The box office, however, July 22nd, 1988.
Ben, do you have something to say? You just made some noise on the desk.
Oh, sorry. Just the chain of my handcuffs.
Gotcha.
I forgot, of course, the chain. You do probably love that it has one.
Yeah, I do, actually.
If you can get them off, you can like tuck one of them into your pocket and then the other into the pocket of the cardigan.
Alan,
that's fun.
When I was in high school, I wore both cuffs of a handcuff on one side of my wrist as like a bracelet in that way.
And what was the response to that?
Did everyone high five you?
Yeah, wild applause. Homecoming King? What are you talking about? Everyone just went like, what's the thing this week, Griffin? It was a lot of that. What's the thing you're doing this week?
Look, I can't judge. I grew out like Jason Priestley sideburns my senior year of high school.
Yeah.
I
did this for a while.
As did I. You can see it in my high school yearbook.
Hey.
The film opens number 5. Now, this is not an era where it's like absolutely the opening weekend is make or break, but so we're talking the late 80s. Yeah. It's a slightly underwhelming opening, but it had really good legs.
Mm-hmm.
It's opening number 5 to $5.5 million.
Yeah.
So it's 5th on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1, Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the best film in 1988.
Maybe the best film of 1988. In your opinion.
We've covered it on this podcast.
It was discussed earlier in this episode.
It is the film Die Hard?
Nope. That is number 3, which is another argument for the best film in 1988, as is Midnight Run.
Was it part of your spreadsheet?
Part of my acting nominees, for sure.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I mean,
it's 5th week of release.
We did the Die Hard box office game recently, but this is Summer 88 really was like fucking Eaton was good. You couldn't misstep.
How could you have those 3 movies in theaters at the same time?
Insane. Yes.
So, good movie that we like.
Great movie. That's a masterpiece.
Number 2 at the box office, another big hit of the year, huge hit of the year, starring a guy Martin Brest just worked with.
It's an Eddie movie.
It is.
It's not Beverly Hills Cop 2.
No, which I think it might have already come out, right? Is that 87?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Look it up. I'm not sure.
Quicker turnaround on that. Is this Golden Child?
It is 87. No, it's not Golden Child.
It's good. So it's not
this is
Child.
like one of
you
Eddie's
said it's
best.
a good one. It's Coming to America?
It's Coming to America.
Yeah. Sorry.
Which is great.
I mean, this is, once again, these are like the highest...
Roger Rabbit, Coming to America, Die Hard, and Midnight Run are all in the top 5.
Is like, Coming to America Eddie's best movie?
The highest level of intelligent commercial filmmaking.
Wait, what was your question, Alan?
Is Coming to America Eddie's best movie?
No, I don't think so. Some people do, though.
I think...
I think 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop and Trading Places are all better.
I mean, Bowfinger is wonderful, but that's more of like a Steve Martin vehicle.
I think it's Coming to America. Wow. I think that's my answer.
I like Trading Places, though.
Me too. For all its flaws.
Okay.
Number 3 is Die Hard, as we said. Doing really well.
Jesus.
And actually, this is kind of Die Hard's first wide week.
Okay.
It opened limited the week before.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 is we've done this so many times. It's the 5th in a franchise.
It's Police Academy.
No. It's a franchise that often comes up on the box office game because there are 5 of them.
Okay.
But they don't have numbers.
Oh, Jesus Christ. It's Dirty Harry.
It's a Dirty Harry. And you can never, you
one...
usually remember the names.
Yeah.
You just don't remember the order.
Jim Carrey lip syncs to Guns N' Roses in it.
He sure does. Jim Carrey is actually
the Deadpool.
The Deadpool.
Okay, well, that's the one that's easier for me to get.
It's the fifth. The last one is the Deadpool.
Yeah. It's the one that knows it's the last Dirty Harry movie.
It's the one where he seems
get the joke
really exhausted.
I can name all of them, but the middle one.
It goes what? It's
Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, something, Sudden Impact, Deadpool. The middle one is either the Enforcer or the Gauntlet. One of those is Dirty Harry, and one is not.
A different claim.
The Gauntlet is a different good.
Okay, then it's got to be the Enforcer.
It's the Enforcer, which is also pretty good.
That always slips me up that there's Magnum Force and the Enforcer.
Well, you know what? Hollywood was doing just fine.
Okay.
Number 6 at the box office is a re-release of Bambi.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7, interestingly enough, is new this week. Big Top Pee-wee, the fairly unsuccessful Pee Wee Herman sequel.
A deeply weird movie.
Number 8, also new this week, another big failure sequel, Caddyshack 2.
Oh,
back
to
the
Shack.
A really bad movie.
Oh my God.
I've never seen it.
Caddyshack 2 is one. It's similar to Fletch 1. Fletch 2. Fletch Lives. Sorry, that's what it's called.
Right.
Where it's like amazing how uninterested people were in it. Correctly, it's bomb.
But Chevy was the only one who returned.
Chevy returns. You have Aykroyd basically as the Murray type
They went
role.
lateral on everyone, where it's like Aykroyd's replacing Murray, Jackie Mason's replacing Rodney Dangerfield.
Robert Stack is replacing Ted Knight.
Right.
Jonathan Silverman replaces what's his face?
Why am I fucking forgetting his name?
Knight had died.
The guy who plays Danny Noonan.
Yes. David.
Michael O'Keefe.
Oh, sorry. I love Michael O'Keefe.
Yes.
Oscar nominee.
But it's like 4 lateral casting shifts. And then Chevy is the one who still shows
because
up.
That's probably why the others are staying away.
Yeah.
And Chevy could not look more bored. Like, it's the most bored
Chevy
in a
Chase?
career of...
Phone in a performance
It's
in
a
film?
real jury duty. Like,
I once spent
how
2.5
long
hours with you guys talking about Chevy Chase phoning in a performance. This is far worse than that.
Yeah, to which our listeners said, where are these guys getting this take that Chevy Chase is unpleasant to work with? Where is their backing for this?
Number
I've never heard such a thing in my life.
9 is Big.
How would Big have been with De Niro?
Bad.
Could he have done
well, it was famously a role he pursued. And
we talked about it
turned
in
down.
this episode.
Yep. And I would love to see it, but obviously Big is a pretty perfect movie.
Yeah. Awakenings feels like the better Penny Marshall collab.
Big, by the way, a film we now have to cover since you've convinced most of our Reddit that we're covering Penny Marshall immediately.
I thought it was funny to troll everyone and saying that we were doing Penny Marshall next, and now people were like, well, I don't get why it's a joke.
Why is Marshall not on the schedule? I don't like what he confirmed it.
Well, now he's upset us.
This reminds me, obviously...
Now he's obsessed. Sorry, Alan, go ahead. Number 10, Bill Durham.
Okay.
Great film.
Well, speaking of... Okay, if you're doing Penny, you got to get a female guest to do A League of Their Own, but basically any other underdog sports movie, please, reach out to me. That's the other thing.
I understand.
If you do the David S. Ward miniseries, I'm obviously doing Major
Ben's always.
I mean, I've been pushing for that for a while now. I mean, at least we got to do The King.
I mean, would you...
Well, that's true.
Would you do Shelton?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
It's dangerous, though, the idea of doing a King Ralph episode. It's the reason we put it on the schedule a bunch of times and pushed it off.
What's the Shelton?
Because if you come for the King, you better not miss.
I think Bull Durham is the Shelton Black check.
No, that's the Guarantor. That's his first movie.
Isn't it Blaze?
Maybe it's Blaze.
Blaze or
Cobb.
Yeah, those are both.
But Cobb is one of those movies where you're like, but no, that's like a movie Hollywood would want to make, right? A biopic of a famous ball player. Yeah. It's just that movie's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And
has
contributed to this somewhat odd myth of Ty Cobb being the most evil person who ever lived.
But also Tommy Lee Jones accepting the Oscar for Fugitive with the bald hair
for a reason. Yes, this is for a role.
The Fred Mertz.
Yeah. But I think the problem with doing Shelton is just Hollywood homicide and fucking just getting started, this sort of end of his career. What?
No, you say it's like it's a bad thing, but I think when we reach the end of his filmography, in many ways, it's just getting started. I want to get that joke out before you said that.
I have to pee very badly.
I do too.
Wow. Okay. Competition.
United Front. I'll let you go first.
I've been holding it in. Again, I'm a professional.
Yes.
Well, so have I.
Well, listen,
I just want to say something. A long episode.
I just want to say something here at the end.
Ben is still handcuffed.
Okay.
And now that he's doing this kind of putting his hands up, it actually looks like he's in trouble.
He's not doing a real movie poster pose.
It's kind of like Swedish Chef gestures. Where
All right. Ben, what do you have to say for yourself?
My clothing brand, congratulations.
Of course.
Okay. It may not have been a great idea to do an unsanctioned crossover with Friendly's restaurant.
It's not really a crossover when it's just your idea and they don't know about it. But yes,
This is sort of like the Alfonso Mosley being in Witless Protection.
Right. A crossover by force.
Right.
I thought they were going to be into it.
Right.
Apparently not. But
Okay.
did you need to get the courts involved? No. Okay. But I'm going to figure this out.
Okay. Is this a running thread now across multiple episodes?
We'll see.
I weirdly leaned back from the microphone so I could play my invisible sax into it like I had to position it. What's the matter with me?
It wasn't a volume issue. It was like, well, clearly there's not the clearance.
Gotta get the mic right on that thing. We have finished discussing Midnight Run, Ben.
Ben, how much
If
time have we
anyone
taken
knows a
up
good
here?
lawyer, just let me know.
245,
Only
248.
240. What the fuck
My
are
dad's
we doing
will hit
here? This is a
3.
failure.
Yeah.
It's not a failure to go. It's good. It's fine. Like the ones that are too long, it's not because we discussed the movie more. It's because we did a lot of other bullshit.
Yeah.
That's always true.
Right.
Like if Alex Perry comes on, God bless his soul, I love him coming on, but like we have a lot of like tangents to sift through. He has to explain weird nicknames he'll never explain. Like, like there's a lot of like stuff. Like
I reimagined a lot of their like different desserts and like the logos.
Yes, you did a good job.
It wasn't a
I'm gonna go to the
complete-
bathroom.
It's good.
David, I'm just speaking as a listener of the show as well as a guest who has a lot to get done in his life that
Yes.
podcasts help get him through.
Hey.
I'm so glad that we do nice long podcasts and people
But
enjoy
they're
them.
not long enough.
For fuck's
This
sake,
is
they're
the
very
problem.
long. They're extremely long. I won't have this.
Alan was in the hospital and he called me and he said, they're keeping me here overnight. Can you put out a 12-hour episode ASAP?
Yeah, I was in the hospital like 12 times in the last 2 years. Do you have any
10-year
idea?
back
I
catalog.
went through the whole back catalog.
That's true.
Don't inflate our numbers.
Oh, it's getting close to 10. I'm rounding up.
Alan, anything you want to plug?
Well, again, I've got a book. It's called Saul Goodman versus Jimmy McGill, the Better Call Saul Complete Critical Companion.
Sure.
One of
That's
my favorite TV shows ever.
coming out from Abrams Books in February around the 10th anniversary of Better Call Saul's premiere.
Cool.
You can pre-order it now, and pre-orders always important for books.
Hey, yeah.
There'll be a link in the episode description.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. At Rolling Stone, I've got a Substack newsletter called What's Alan Watching? Just, sort of, if you don't want to be on
I've been
social
reading
media.
some version of What's Alan Watching since I was like 15 years
At this point, a legacy brand.
Yes. Stolen, getting back to Eddie Murphy, stolen from an unsold
Yes.
pilot.
Yes.
I
which
am
is
almost
fascinating,
certain
that thing.
that when I was a teenager, if I typed S into my browser, it would complete
Sepinwall.
sepinwall.blogspot.com.
Well,
Just
that's
to let you know, Alan.
I appreciate that,
Yes.
David. And yeah, so if you want to follow me and don't want to be on any social media, because why would you want to be on social media at this point? The newsletter is free. It's got links to everything I write and other just goofy stuff that I'm thinking about. And yeah.
Wow, it's still up.
I'll plug Empire bail bonds. Hopefully that might help my case with them. They're pretty mad at me.
David's taking his headphones
Well, I'm gonna
off.
pee.
in
You take us
protest.
out.
He's this fair-weathered friend. Peeing while I do the outros. He always finds a way. His solidarity always crumbles during the outro. The real heavy lift of the show. The hard work. Anyone can host a podcast, riff, bit, read from a dossier.
Put on handcuffs
The outro, though, is
against your will.
it's the thing that separates the amateurs from the pros. Ben's winking a lot.
I realized we got through all this. I didn't even bring up the fact that, because they were shooting it in order, Martin Brest basically tried to stage every scene so that if a character is traveling east, they are facing to the right of the frame.
Oh, yes.
If they're traveling west, they are facing to the left of the frame.
It's fucking directional filmmaking.
Yep.
This is the shit that George Miller rightfully gets praised for in the Mad Max movies, but is invisible craft that we all internalize, we process, we register in terms of it helping our enjoyment and the legibility of the film. And people do not shout it out because this movie's greatest magic trick is just making itself seem very fun and breezy and organic. David?
Yes.
I want you to look me in the eyes
Uh-huh.
as I say a couple of things that are very important.
What's that?
Thank you all for listening. Look me in the eyes. You're in this. You're part of this.
Uh-huh.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you.
When's the last time you did that, David?
When was the last time you did that?
Keep going. We need to be done. We need to do ads.
His subscribe finger is covered in dust. He hasn't rated.
I have a call with my editor.
He hasn't rated a podcast in a fortnight.
Please, can we wrap up?
Thank you to Marie Party for helping to produce the show. Thank you to Joe Bone and Pat Reynolds for our artwork. Ben is still handcuffed.
Keep going.
He's showing off the chain.
Keep going.
Thank you to AJ McKeon for our editing. AJ McKeon's also our production coordinator. Thanks to Leigh Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song. JJ Birch for our research. He texted us late last night and said, sorry, the midnight run dossier is going to be a little late, but I've been sick and fighting the midnight runs. 10 comedy points to that.
Been there.
Tune in next week for Scent of a Woman with David Krumholtz.
That's right.
Krumholtz.
We fucking did it. We called our intention at the beginning of the year. We got the crumb! We got the crumb!
Yeah, great app.
Great app. A fucking corker. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon Blank Check special features, where we're doing commentaries on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, we're not.
No,
we haven't
we are.
cracked open the.
No, we're deep in Turtles.
We haven't cleared the tabletop yet.
Deep in Turtles.
Okay.
We don't clear the tabletop till August.
Oh, and what an August it will be.
That's right.
And as always, try to learn.